Chapter 1605. It could be said that the wine Taoist set his sights on Xiao Qin right away. The wine Taoist's expression turned cold as he looked at Xiao Qin. He then bellowed in anger, "Xiao Qin, let me clean up the place myself today." In the wine Taoist's heart, Xiao Qin was his disciple. Now that Xiao Qin had killed his father and wife and betrayed the seventh realm, the wine Taoist felt that he should personally end Xiao Qin's life. Sensing the faint, killing intent emanating from the wine Taoist, Xiao Qin's expression did not change much. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. With the dustless sword in hand, Xiao Qin's aura instantly became fierce. He looked at the wine Taoist and said faintly, "Come on." The wine Taoist was full of killing intent towards him, thinking that he was a traitor who wanted to climb up the seventh realm. Xiao Qin also knew that it was useless to say anything more. Since the wine Taoist wanted to fight, then let's fight. As his former master, no one could understand the bitterness in Xiao Qin's heart. Who would have thought that the person who had taught him cultivation and accompanied him for 5 years would now become his mortal enemy? Hearing Xiao Qin's words and feeling the faint chill emanating from Xiao Qin, the wine Taoist's eyes flashed with a cold light. The drunken look on his face had already disappeared. Without saying anything more, the wine Taoist shouted in a deep voice and immediately slapped out with his palm. He shouted coldly, "Traitor, die! Universe of Myriad Tao." The Universe of Myriad Tao was a second-grade immortal skill. It could be said that it was the wine Taoist's best skill. Moreover, the wine Taoist had already cultivated the Universe of Myriad Tao to the perfection realm. Its power was extremely great. As the wine Taoist slapped out with his palm, the space seemed to distort directly. Spiritual power distorted the space like a vortex and directly enveloped Xiao Qin. The vortex of spiritual power was the universe. It contained heaven and earth, and it was enhanced by the power of more than 10 laws. With a single palm strike, the heavens and earth lost their color. He had been with Xiao Qin for 5 years, but this was the first time the wine Taoist had revealed his true strength before Xiao Qin's birthday. Originally, he thought that wine Taoist was only an immortal venerable, but now it seemed like wine Taoist wasn't an ordinary immortal venerable. His cultivation base had already reached the limit of the immortal venerable realm. It could even be said that he was half a step into the immortal emperor realm. It was no exaggeration to say that wine Taoist's strength had reached the peak of the immortal venerable realm. In the seventh wilderness, wine Taoist was second only to the few immortal emperors. Being enveloped by the myriad Tao universe, one could imagine the pressure Xiao Qin was under. He was surrounded by violent vortexes of spiritual energy, and he felt like he was about to be swallowed whole. Moreover, in addition to the violent spiritual energy vortex, there were also more than 10 violent powers of the laws, which made it difficult for Xiao Qin to withstand. It was also because Xiao Qin had refined the force of living beings and condensed the heavenly immortal mansion that he wasn't an ordinary immortal realm expert. Therefore, he was able to withstand the palm strike. Otherwise, if it was any other immortal realm expert, this palm strike would have been enough to kill him. The difference between the heavenly immortal mansion and the earth immortal mansion was huge. It could be said that one was in the sky while the other was on the ground. Therefore, with the heavenly immortal mansion, Xiao Qin could challenge ordinary immortal venerables. However, this was only referring to ordinary immortal venerables or those who had just entered the immortal venerable realm. Wine Taoist was obviously not in this category. As an antique that had existed since the ancient times, wine Taoist had been silent in the immortal venerable realm for a long time. His foundation was so deep that it was obviously not comparable to those who had just entered the immortal venerable realm. The sword domain gushed out, and at the same time, the 5 elemental laws revolved around Xiao Qin to resist wine Taoist's myriad Tao universe. The myriad Tao universe contained the universe. Not only did it cause great harm to the physical body, but it also attacked the soul. Therefore, when facing the myriad Tao universe, even immortal venerables who were in the same realm as Wine Taoist didn't dare to lower their guard. Under the myriad Tao universe's shroud, Shao Chen raised his aura to the extreme. However, the gap between their cultivation bases still stood out at this moment. In the face of Wine Taoist's suppression, although Shao Chen tried his best, he was still gradually suppressed by the myriad Tao universe. While Shao Chen was gradually being suppressed by the myriad Tao of universe, many powerful beings in the seventh realm naturally noticed the changes in this place. At this moment, an expert from the seventh realm, who was almost at the immortal emperor realm like Wine Taoist, immediately rushed towards Shao Chen, intending to rescue Shao Chen. Although Shao Chen wasn't very popular in the seventh realm, Shao Chen was the heir of the seventh realm. Therefore, the experts of the seventh realm naturally couldn't watch Shao Chen be killed. However, just as the expert from the seventh realm was about to rescue Shao Chen, another expert from the seventh wilderness blocked his way. The two of them stood opposite each other. The expert from the seventh wilderness sneered. "Don't waste your efforts. A traitor should be killed." Obviously, the expert from the seventh wilderness didn't want to see anyone rescue Shao Chen. To the people of the seventh wilderness, Shao Chen was a traitor and the person they hated the most. It was very sad that a traitor should be killed, but Shao Chen couldn't change this. When the strong cultivator from the seventh wasteland sneered, his face darkened. So this is how the seventh wasteland does things? Bullying the weak. You're really something, said the strong cultivator from the seventh wasteland. The Wine Taoist was a mighty one of the older generation. In terms of age, the Wine Taoist was old enough to be the great ancestor of Shao Chen. As such, when the Wine Taoist personally made a move against Shao Chen, it indeed felt like he was bullying the weak. However, the expert from the seventh wasteland smiled coldly when he heard that. He didn't care at all. Is there a need to talk about morality when dealing with a traitor? Moreover, Shao Chen killed his own father and wife. He is an animal. Everyone has the right to kill him. Why should we care about what methods he used? He didn't think it was despicable at all. The process of killing Shao Chen wasn't important. What mattered was the result. Hearing this, the expert from the seventh realm didn't say anything more. He took a step forward and immediately threw a punch at the expert. Shao Chen's situation was very dangerous, so the expert from the seventh realm didn't have time to talk nonsense. However, their cultivation was almost the same. For a moment, the expert from the seventh realm couldn't get away to rescue Shao Chen. Not only him, but other experts from the seventh realm who wanted to rescue Shao Chen were also stopped by the people from the seventh wilderness. They didn't have the slightest chance to rescue Shao Chen. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1606. Many experts from the seventh realm were stopped, and they were unable to rescue Shao Chen. At the same time, Shao Chen, who was enveloped by the universe of myriad Tao, was completely covered in blood. The violent spiritual power and the power of laws in the surroundings tore through all of Shao Chen's defenses with ease. The lesser perfection sword realm and the law of the five elements were all easily torn apart by the universe of myriad Tao. Then, countless wounds appeared on Shao Chen's body. The violent power seemed to want to tear Shao Chen apart, not giving Shao Chen any room to resist at all. Blood kept flowing out of the wounds. Seeing Shao Chen in this state, the Wine Taoist, who was not far away, could not bear to see him like this. Yes, the Wine Taoist did hate Shao Chen. He hated Shao Chen for killing his parents and betraying the seventh realm. However, other than hatred, the Wine Taoist also could not bear to see him like this. No matter what, Shao Chen was his disciple, and the only disciple of the Wine Taoist in his life. In the past, the Wine Taoist had high hopes for Shao Chen. It could be said that he had taught Shao Chen without holding back. He had given all the help that he could give to Shao Chen. He had high hopes for Shao Chen, but as the saying goes, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. No one knew how much pain the wine Taoist had felt when he first heard that Xiao Chen had betrayed the seventh realm. He had asked himself countless times why Xiao Chen had betrayed the seventh realm. Was it just because of the position of the heir of the seventh realm? Apart from hatred, the wine Taoist was more heartbroken. He had expected better from Xiao Chen. At this moment, looking at Xiao Chen, who was already covered in blood and looked extremely miserable, the wine Taoist could not bear to see him like this. No matter what Xiao Chen had done, the two of them were still master and disciple, and Xiao Chen was his only disciple after all. The wine Taoist's memories had not been tampered with by the will of the heavenly way. Firstly, the wine Taoist's cultivation was very high. It was far from what Yin Yangzi and the others could compare with. Therefore, tampering with the wine Taoist's memories was not an easy task even for the will of the heavenly way. Secondly, as someone who had been following the will of the heavenly way for a long time, the wine Taoist's trust in the will of the heavenly way had reached an unimaginable level. As such, there was no need to tamper with his memories. In any case, the wine Taoist would choose to believe in the will of the heavenly way no matter what. Precisely because his memories had not been tampered with, the wine Taoist could not bear to kill Xiao Chen with his own hands. He could not bear to watch Xiao Chen die like this. The expression in his eyes became extremely complicated at this moment. In the end, the wine Taoist still spoke to Xiao Chen, who was enveloped by the universe of myriad paths. Xiao Chen, I'll give you one more chance. Come with me to the will of the heavenly way and admit your mistake. I'll definitely save your life. I can also convince the will of the heavenly way not to pursue the matter of the past, the wine Taoist said. However, Xiao Chen, who was covered in blood, gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, Admit my mistakes to the will of the heavenly way? Ha, what a joke! The will of the heavenly way had killed his entire family. Asking Xiao Chen to admit his mistakes to the will of the heavenly way was simply a joke. Even if he died, Xiao Chen would never admit his mistakes to the will of the heavenly way. Moreover, even if he admitted his mistakes, would the will of the heavenly way let him go? Absolutely not. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the wine Taoist was furious. He huffed coldly and said, Stubborn. The wine Taoist's current mood was like that of an elder facing a mischievous junior. From the wine Taoist's perspective, Xiao Chen had done something wrong, so what was wrong with apologizing to the will of the heavenly path? Why did Xiao Chen have to be so determined to betray the seventh realm? Why did he have to become the heir of some *T seventh realm? Why did he have to stand on the opposite side of all living beings? The wine Taoist naturally didn't know what Xiao Chen had encountered. He also didn't know what the will of the heavenly way had done to Xiao Chen. He also didn't know the truth between the world and all living beings. Xiao Chen ignored the wine Taoist's angry yell. Determination flashed through his eyes. Around Xiao Chen, thick blood qi began to gather. As the blood qi gathered, Xiao Chen's eyes turned even redder. It was an extremely demonic red. Moreover, his aura suddenly increased at this moment. He advanced triumphantly. His aura quickly rose to its peak. At the same time, the dustless sword in his hand became a true blood sword. The thick blood qi around the sword directly liquefied and wrapped around the dustless sword. One could even see drops of blood dripping from the dustless sword. Xiao Chen didn't hesitate to burn the power of his bloodline. At this moment, he was at his strongest. At the same time, this sword was destined to be Xiao Chen's strongest sword to date. His aura had almost reached the level of an immortal venerable. He looked up at the wine Taoist. Because he had burned the power of his bloodline, Xiao Chen's eyes, nose, and ears were bleeding. He looked extremely frightening. However, although his expression was frightening, Xiao Chen's eyes were filled with determination. Xiao Chen gritted his teeth and said, stressing each and every word, You can call me a demon or a beast. Since the world is unfair, I, Shao Chen, will go against the heavens and slay the heavens." With that, Shao Chen gripped the dustless sword with both hands and raised it high above his head. At the same time, the dustless sword let out a resonant sword cry. The entire sword began to vibrate violently, as if responding to Shao Chen's determination. Even if he died, he wouldn't bow his head to the will of the heavenly way. If not today, Shao Chen would one day slay the heavens with the 3-foot sword in his hand. With a furious roar, Shao Chen slashed out with his sword. The moment Jian Feng's words fell, time seemed to have stopped as a blood-red sword light enveloped the entire area. Following Shao Chen's sword attack, the faces of the cultivators from both sides who were fighting fiercely changed. Everyone looked at the sky in disbelief. What did they see? The heavens! The heavens had split open. That's right, the heavens had left. It wasn't the space that had shattered, nor was it a spatial rift that had been slashed open by the sword. It was the sky that had split open. The blood-red sword light was filled with a dense blood qi and a deep hatred. How much hatred did this person have to possess to be able to unleash such a hateful sword strike? Everyone was stunned. A sword slashed open the sky. It wasn't just them. The will of the heavenly way from the 7th wilderness also saw Shao Chen's sword slash. He immediately said with a stern expression, "Damn it. This kid has damaged the 7th wilderness's origin laws. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me." Sword Master 8 Wilderness. Chapter 1607. Shao Chen's sword had injured the origin of the laws. As soon as his voice faded, a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of the will of the heavenly way's mouth. As the will of the heavenly way, he would naturally be implicated when the origin of the laws was injured. What was the origin of the laws? The laws set up by the heavens and earth to control all living beings. The origin of the laws was the source of the laws of heaven and earth. It could be said that it was the source of power for the will of the heavenly way. Of course, the fact that Shao Chen's sword could injure the origin of the laws didn't mean that Shao Chen's sword was very powerful. Even if Shao Chen had burned the power of his bloodline, the power of the sword itself was only at the level of an immortal venerable. Many experts present had such strength. Therefore, what shocked them wasn't the power of Shao Chen's sword, but the intense hatred contained in Shao Chen's sword. Everyone was shocked by the hatred in this sword. Just how great was the enmity that could give birth to such intense hatred? It would not be an exaggeration to say that such hatred was monstrous. It was precisely because of the hatred contained in the sword that Shao Chen was able to injure the origin of the laws of heaven and earth. Because of the hatred, the sword seemed to have a mind of its own and directly injured the origin of the laws. Heaven and earth lost their color when the sword was unleashed. At the same time, Wine Daoist's universe of myriad Dao was directly shattered by Shao Chen's sword. However, at this moment, Shao Chen didn't care about Wine Daoist because after injuring the origin of the laws of heaven and earth, Shao Chen suddenly had an inexplicable feeling in his heart. Although he didn't know how to explain it, Shao Chen seemed to know that his sword had injured the will of the heavenly way. To be able to injure the will of the heavenly way. The hatred in Shao Chen's eyes grew stronger. For more than half a year, Shao Chen had never stopped thinking about revenge. When he saw the will of the heavenly way, the hatred in Shao Chen's heart was about to erupt completely. However, it was suppressed by the last trace of reason in the end. However, it was different now. Now that Shao Chen had injured the will of the heavenly way, the monstrous hatred in his heart poured out uncontrollably like water from a broken dam. Qin Shuru, Fairy of 100 Flowers, Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu, his father, his mother, all the familiar figures flashed across his mind. When he thought of his family, the dustless sword in Shao Chen's hand didn't weaken in the slightest because of the sword. On the contrary, the liquefied blood qi that was like fresh blood became even stronger at this moment. He burned the power of his bloodline again, and this time, Xiao Chen didn't care about the consequences. The hatred in his heart made Xiao Chen completely crazy. At this moment, there was only one thought in Xiao Chen's mind, and that was revenge. He wanted to avenge his wife, his parents, and his family. The blood qi in his body was extremely strong, but Xiao Chen's face also became paler and paler. Moreover, blood kept flowing out from the corners of his eyes like a tap that had been turned on. It looked like tears of blood. Xiao Chen spurted out a mouthful of blood. Due to the excessive burning of the power of his bloodline, the injuries in his body were extremely serious. However, after paying such a huge price, Xiao Chen's cultivation base finally broke through to the immortal venerable realm with a boom. Of course, Xiao Chen wouldn't be able to maintain this state for long. At most, he would only need one more sword strike. However, his heart was already swallowed by hatred. Obviously, Xiao Chen couldn't care less now. His red eyes stared fixedly at the crack in the sky. His body couldn't stop trembling, but he still held the dustless sword tightly with both hands. He raised it high, as if he was about to slash out again. The hatred in his heart became even stronger. In addition to hatred, there was also a strong longing for his family in this sword strike. Since the heavenly Tao is unfair, I will use the 3-foot sword in my hand to slash it. Xiao Chen gritted his teeth. In the end, even speaking became extremely difficult for him. Blood kept spurting out of his mouth. But as soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen slashed out with his sword without any hesitation. The power of this sword strike was even stronger than the previous one. Upon seeing this, many experts of the 7th wilderness snorted coldly. "Humph, how dare you, a thief!" The experts of the 7th wilderness were furious. However, the experts of the 7th realm were incomparably shocked. No one had expected Xiao Chen to be able to launch such a powerful attack. Just as Xiao Chen's second strike landed, the origin of the heavenly Tao was injured again. This time, Will of the Heavenly Way spurted out a mouthful of blood. The Will of the Heavenly Path was infuriated by the fact that Xiao Chen had injured the origin of the rules twice in a row. It ignored the blood at the corner of its mouth, and glared at Xiao Chen with a pair of cold eyes as it spoke viciously. "Xiao Chen, you're courting death." To the Will of the Heavenly Way, Xiao Chen was just an ant. Although he had obtained the power of living beings, broken through to the immortal realm, and condensed the heavenly immortal abode, so what? Without the protection of Luoli and the Hachibra Senkai, the Will of the Heavenly Way could kill him with a flip of his hand. But it was this young man, whom he regarded as an ant, who had injured the 7th wilderness's origin of the heavenly Tao twice in a row. Before this, the Will of the Heavenly Way would never have thought that the one who injured him would be Xiao Chen. He had been provoked by an ant. However, in the face of the Will of the Heavenly Way's angry roar, Xiao Chen spat out a mouthful of blood. The determination in his eyes became even stronger. He completely disregarded his own condition and began to burn the power of his bloodline again. As long as he could injure the Will of the Heavenly Way, Xiao Chen did not care about the consequences. Because he hated the Will of the Heavenly Way, Xiao Chen did not care about the consequences. Therefore, as long as he could injure the Will of the Heavenly Way, Xiao Chen did not care about the consequences. Hatred had completely swallowed Xiao Chen's rationality. Seeing that Xiao Chen was about to burn the power of his bloodline again, many experts of the 7th realm immediately shouted, "Stop! You'll die if you continue." They had already seen that Xiao Chen was an arrow at the end of its flight. After burning the power of his bloodline twice in a row, Xiao Chen could be said to be hanging on by a thread. If he burned the power of his bloodline again, Xiao Chen would really die. The experts of the 7th realm shouted angrily. The Will of the Heavenly Way saw that Xiao Chen was about to attack the origin of the Heavenly Way again, and the killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. He gnashed his teeth and said, Xiao Chen, ignoring the shouts of the crowd and the killing intent of the will of the heavenly way, Xiao Chen gripped the dustless sword with trembling hands and said with great difficulty, "The will of the heavenly way is the heavenly way. If the heavenly Tao is unjust, cough, I'll lift the 3-foot-long sword in my hand and slash it." Xiao Chen spoke intermittently. Every time he opened his mouth, he would spit out a mouthful of blood. But even so, he still raised the dustless sword above his head and was about to slash down again. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1608. Seeing the will of the heavenly way in the seventh wilderness again, Xiao Chen's hatred completely erupted. His heart was completely consumed by hatred. Xiao Chen kept burning his bloodline power. Seeing that he was about to strike again, many cultivators from the seventh realm frowned and tried to stop him. Everyone could tell that Xiao Chen was at the end of his rope. After all, with Xiao Chen's current cultivation, it was indeed a little too difficult for him to damage the seventh wilderness's origin of laws. 2 slashes were already his limit. If he slashed a third time, Xiao Chen would probably be completely crippled even if he didn't die. Compared to the worry of the experts from the seventh realm, the people from the seventh wilderness were all furious. After all, Xiao Chen had damaged the origin of laws twice in a row and even damaged the will of the heavenly way. How could they not be furious? However, there was one exception among the crowd's anger, and that was the wine Taoist. Previously, he had been disappointed in Xiao Chen for failing to live up to his expectations. Now, looking at Xiao Chen, who was covered in blood and whose aura was extremely weak, the wine Taoist did not know why, but he felt a pain in his heart, as if he was being pricked by needles. He couldn't bear to see Xiao Chen like this. Furthermore, the wine Taoist really couldn't understand why Xiao Chen was so persistent. Even if he had to risk his life, he would still severely injure the will of the heavenly way. What kind of hatred was there between the two of them? The wine Taoist didn't know why Xiao Chen hated the will of the heavenly way so much. Of course, the wine Taoist didn't suspect the will of the heavenly way. He just didn't understand. Everyone's gaze was focused on Xiao Chen. Seeing that Xiao Chen was about to slash again, the murderous intent in the seventh will of the heavenly way's eyes was extremely dense. If it weren't for the fact that the seventh wilderness will of the heavenly way had to guard the great formation of ultimate heaven extinguishing, he would have killed Xiao Chen with his own hands a long time ago. A mere ant dared to injure him again and again. The killing intent in his eyes was incomparably dense. However, Xiao Chen didn't care about it at all. He endured the thousands of wounds on his body and was about to slash down with his sword. Regardless of what would happen to him after this sword strike, Xiao Chen only had one thought in his mind right now, and that was to avenge his family. However, just as Xiao Chen was about to slash out, a red figure rushed into Xiao Chen's arms and hugged Xiao Chen tightly. Needless to say, this red figure was none other than Xiao Hongxiu. After witnessing Xiao Chen's current state, Xiao Hongxiu was heartbroken. Besides, she could also tell that if Xiao Chen continued to burn his bloodline power, he would really die. Therefore, without any explanation, Xiao Hongxiu hugged Xiao Chen tightly and didn't give him a chance to attack. "No, that's enough. That's enough." Xiao Hongxiu hugged Xiao Chen tightly. Tears flowed out of her eyes as she shook her head and said, even though Xiao Hongxiu didn't know what kind of hatred there was between Xiao Chen and the seventh will of the heavenly way, she didn't want to see Xiao Chen die. "It's enough. It's really enough," Xiao Hongxiu sobbed. Facing Xiao Hongxiu, who was hugging him tightly, Xiao Chen's blood-red eyes were filled with intense hatred. He tried to break free from Xiao Hongxiu, but Xiao Hongxiu didn't give Xiao Chen a chance. She hugged Xiao Chen tightly. After being stopped by Xiao Hongxiu, in addition to the fact that Xiao Chen had really reached his limit, his aura quickly withered. At the same time, his vision became blurry. However, at the very last moment, Xiao Chen's eyes were still fixed on the will of the seventh Baron Heavenly Path. It was extremely difficult for him to do so, but his eyes were filled with endless hatred and reluctance. I only hate that I don't have the strength to kill you. Until now, Xiao Chen was still thinking about killing the will of the Heavenly Way. However, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Even though Xiao Chen had risked his life, he only managed to injure the will of the Heavenly Way. Moreover, it wasn't a serious injury, so it didn't hurt him at all. He only hated that he was too weak and couldn't avenge his family. Of course, there was another reason why Xiao Chen insisted on killing the will of the Heavenly Way. Luoli once said that only by killing the will of the Heavenly Way and using the power of the will of the Heavenly Way could resurrect his family. Xiao Chen fell into a coma. Xiao Hongxiu, who was holding Xiao Chen in her arms, looked at the severely injured and unconscious Xiao Chen covered in blood. Her eyes turned red. This unruly little girl, the beloved little princess of the Eighth Realm, was sad for someone for the first time. She didn't know why, but looking at Xiao Chen like this, Xiao Hongxiu felt her heart ache. It was the first time she had felt this way. Xiao Chen had completely fallen into a coma and lost his ability to fight. Xiao Hongxiu, who was holding the unconscious Xiao Chen, obviously couldn't attack anymore. At the same time, Yi Xiao came to the two of them. Looking at the unconscious Xiao Chen and the weeping Xiao Hongxiu, she sighed softly and didn't say anything else. Yi Xiao knew that Xiao Chen was a lunatic, but she didn't expect Xiao Chen to be so crazy that he wanted to kill the will of the Heavenly Way with his immortal realm cultivation. This was no longer something a lunatic could do. Moreover, in the end, Xiao Chen actually managed to injure the will of the Heavenly Way. Although it was just some minor injuries, it was still heaven-defying enough. Xiao Chen was unconscious and Xiao Hongxiu was in pain. At the same time, Yi Xiao naturally faced Wine Daoist. Previously, Xiao Chen was completely focused on the will of the Heavenly Way and didn't pay much attention to Wine Daoist. Now that Xiao Chen had fallen into a coma, an immortal venerable expert from the Seventh Wilderness immediately shouted at Wine Daoist. "Old drunkard, what are you waiting for? Kill Xiao Chen now." This was the best opportunity to kill Xiao Chen. The current Xiao Chen didn't have the strength to resist at all. However, after hearing this, Wine Daoist unconsciously looked at Xiao Chen. Looking at Xiao Chen, who was covered in blood and whose aura was extremely weak, Wine Daoist's eyes became more and more complicated. He knew that this was the best opportunity to kill Xiao Chen. After all, Yi Xiao was the only one standing in front of him. With Wine Daoist's strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through Yi Xiao's obstruction and kill Xiao Chen. However, did he really have to kill Xiao Chen? Although the Wine Daoist had said before that he would definitely kill Xiao Chen himself to clean up the mess, when the time came, the Wine Daoist found that he simply could not do it. Every bit of the time he had spent with Xiao Chen flashed through Daoist Wine's mind. Wine Daoist stood rooted to the ground, feeling very conflicted. Xiao Chen was his only disciple. Seeing that Wine Daoist didn't make a move, the expert from the Seventh Wilderness who had spoken earlier shouted again. "Old drunkard, what are you doing? Why aren't you making a move? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1609. The Wine Taoist did not make a move for a long time. The experts of the Seventh Wilderness all shouted. Now was the best chance to kill Xiao Chen. Moreover, the experts of the Seventh Realm were all blocked by them. Only Yi Xiao was in front of Xiao Chen. Therefore, the Wine Taoist was confident that he could kill Xiao Chen. However, as the Wine Taoist, it was really difficult for him to kill Xiao Chen with his own hands. Although the Wine Taoist did not say anything about Xiao Chen, he did put all his hopes on Xiao Chen. He hoped that Xiao Chen could really inherit his legacy. Now, did the Wine Taoist have to kill Xiao Chen, his only disciple? The wine Taoist and Xiao Chen spent 5 years together on that small, nameless continent that resembled a small island but was covered in bamboo. Although 5 years was very short for an expert like the wine Taoist and could be said to have passed in a flash, those 5 years of experience had indeed established a master-disciple relationship between the two of them. Although the wine Taoist did not say that Xiao Chen was his disciple, and Xiao Chen did not call the wine Taoist his master, the two of them did have a master-disciple relationship. Although they did not say it out loud, they knew it very well in their hearts. Originally, the wine Taoist thought that he could kill Xiao Chen ruthlessly, but who knew that when the matter was really in front of him, the wine Taoist's heart softened. "Old drunkard, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you attacking?" Seeing that the wine Taoist had not made a move, the experts of the seventh wilderness shouted angrily again. At this time, when the people of the seventh realm saw that the wine Taoist wanted to kill Xiao Chen, they all went crazy and rushed to support Xiao Chen. For a moment, the experts of the seventh wilderness could not stop them. After all, their cultivation was similar. If the experts of the seventh realm wanted to force their way out, it would be difficult for the people of the seventh wilderness to stop them. Many of the experts of the seventh wilderness shouted one after another. Hearing this, the wine Taoist finally made his move. He struck out with his palm, and the terrifying spiritual power instantly condensed into a palm print, attacking Xiao Chen and the other two. A wisp of a solemn expression appeared on Yi Zhao's face when he faced wine Taoist's attack. Yi Zhao really didn't have the confidence to face wine Taoist by himself. Not to mention that he still had to protect Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu. He had the thought of escaping with Hong Xiu. It wasn't that Yi Zhao wasn't loyal, but between Hong Xiu and Xiao Chen, Yi Zhao's priority was Hong Xiu's safety. However, just as Yi Zhao had this thought, Hong Xiu spoke first. "Yi Zhao, you can run away by yourself. I won't leave." As though she could read Yi Zhao's mind, Hong Xiu spoke directly. It was absolutely impossible for Hong Xiu to leave Xiao Chen behind and escape by herself. As she spoke, Hong Xiu hugged Xiao Chen even tighter, as though she had already made up her mind to perish together with Xiao Chen. Originally, Yi Zhao had planned to escape with Hong Xiu, but after hearing this, he could only helplessly dismiss the idea. He knew Hong Xiu's personality. Although she seemed unruly, she was also very stubborn. Since she was young, as long as Hong Xiu decided on something, even Hong Lian would rarely change her mind. Therefore, if Yi Zhao forcefully escaped with Hong Xiu and left Xiao Chen behind, Yi Zhao was sure that Hong Xiu would probably hate him to death from now on. Yi Zhao looked helplessly at the two figures and smiled bitterly. "I really owed you guys in my previous life, especially you, Xiao Chen. After this battle, you have to treat me to a drink." Having said that, Yi Zhao immediately dismissed the idea of retreating and decided to take on wine Taoist's palm strike head-on. Terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations surged from his body. As the heir of the eighth realm, Yi Zhao was also a top genius who had condensed the heavenly immortal manner. His aura could be said to be extremely terrifying. Facing wine Taoist, who was almost at the immortal emperor realm, Yi Zhao didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. However, just as Yi Zhao was about to exert all his strength to take on wine Taoist's palm strike, a strange glint flashed across Yi Zhao's eyes, and he murmured softly. This is, as wine Taoist's palm of spiritual energy got closer and closer, Yi Zhao felt that although wine Taoist's palm strike seemed to be extremely powerful, Yi Zhao couldn't feel the slightest bit of destructive power when it got closer. He looked at wine Taoist in confusion. At the same time, wine Taoist also looked at Xiao Chen with a complicated expression and muttered to himself. "Xiao Chen, my disciple, I'm doing this for your own good. I hope you can turn over a new leaf and repent before you're saved." There was no longer any killing intent in wine Taoist's eyes. Instead, there was only helplessness and disappointment. Looking at wine Taoist's expression, Yi Zhao couldn't help but reveal a smile. Then, he pretended to collide with Wine Taoist's palm of spiritual energy. Shortly after, Yi Xiao, Xiao Qin, and Hong Xiu were sent flying by the palm strike. It seemed like the three of them were sent flying by the palm strike, but only the three of them knew that Wine Taoist's palm strike didn't hurt them at all. Moreover, with the strength of the palm strike, the three of them were pushed to a safe place by Wine Taoist. This is... Hong Xiu apparently didn't expect things to turn out this way. How was it possible that such a terrifying palm strike didn't hurt the three of them at all? Moreover, with the strength of the palm strike, the three of them were sent out of the battle and to a safe place. Facing Hong Xiu's doubts, Yi Xiao said with a smile, "That old man didn't want to kill us at all. On the contrary, he even helped us. At least we're safe now," Yi Xiao said and fixed his gaze on Wine Taoist. After Wine Taoist sent Xiao Qin and the other two away with a palm strike, he turned around and engaged in a fierce battle with a powerful being from the seventh realm. Seeing that Xiao Qin and the other two escaped from danger, the people from the seventh wilderness were filled with anger. At the same time, many of them could tell that Wine Taoist did it on purpose. Immediately, a middle-aged man shouted at Wine Taoist, "What do you mean, old drunkard? Do I need to explain to you what I mean?" Wine Taoist replied coldly while fighting with the powerful being from the seventh realm. Wine Taoist couldn't bear to kill Xiao Qin, so he chose to save Xiao Qin. This action naturally infuriated the other powerful beings from the seventh wilderness. No one understood the helplessness in Wine Taoist's heart. Xiao Qin was his only disciple. But now, Wine Taoist only had one wish, and that was for Xiao Qin to repent as soon as possible. In the face of Wine Taoist's ice-cold answer, the powerhouse from the seventh wilderness who questioned earlier snorted in displeasure. "Humph, old drunkard, you can explain to the heavenly Tao when the time comes. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 16:10. Not only did Wine Taoist not kill Xiao Qin, but he also helped Xiao Qin by sending Xiao Qin and the other two out of the battlefield. Wine Taoist didn't say anything in the face of the expert from the seventh wilderness. At this moment, he was already engaged in a fierce battle with another expert from the seventh realm. Wine Taoist could show mercy to Xiao Qin, but he wouldn't show any mercy to the other experts from the seventh realm. The two experts whose cultivation base had reached the peak of the immortal venerable realm were engaged in a fierce battle. Seeing that Wine Taoist didn't respond, the surrounding experts from the seventh wilderness could only shut their mouth. After all, it wasn't the time to pursue these matters. They could only wait until the battle was over. The battle continued. The seventh Baron's will of the heavenly path watched as the Wine Taoist sent Xiao Qin and the other two out of the battlefield. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. He was clearly displeased with the Wine Taoist's actions. However, before the seventh will of the heavenly way could say anything, the eighth will of the heavenly way said in a deep voice, "The array is about to break." The heaven-extinguishing grand formation was about to break. Upon hearing this, the seventh will of the heavenly way's expression changed. He immediately shifted his gaze to the array. Sure enough, the array had begun to fluctuate violently. It was on the verge of collapse. "It can't be stabilized." Although he tried his best to stabilize the array, the eighth will of the heavenly way couldn't help but say helplessly. As soon as his voice fell, the array suddenly shattered. The white light slowly dissipated, and Luoli and Hong Lian gradually appeared in the sky. Injured? No wonder the array formation suddenly became much weaker just now. Hong Lian said with a charming smile as she looked at the seventh will of the heavenly way, who still had traces of blood on the corner of his mouth. The originally indestructible array suddenly fluctuated, and its power weakened a lot. Upon seeing this, Luoli and Hong Lian naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. They immediately attacked and broke out of the array. Upon hearing Hong Lian's words, the seventh will of the heavenly way's face turned extremely gloomy. Originally, the heaven-extinguishing grand formation could absolutely trap Luo Li and Hong Lian. However, because Shao Chun had injured the seventh will of the heavenly way, the array was affected, which allowed Luo Li and Hong Lian to break out of the formation easily. The plan to use the heaven-extinguishing grand formation to trap Luo Li and Hong Lian had completely failed. No one had expected that the key reason for the plan's failure was actually a junior with a cultivation of the immortal realm. If it weren't for Shao Qin, the seventh will of the heavenly way wouldn't have been affected. In this way, Luo Li and Hong Lian naturally wouldn't have been able to break out of the array so easily. Not only did Shao Chun injure the will of the heavenly way, but he also destroyed the will of the heavenly way's plan. This made the seventh will of the heavenly way hate him even more. If it weren't for the fact that Luo Li and Hong Lian were right in front of him, the will of the heavenly way would have killed Shao Qin with his own hands. Compared to the seventh will of the heavenly way's anger, the eighth will of the heavenly way remained calm. Seeing Luo Li and Hong Lian break out of the array, the eighth will of the heavenly way said indifferently, "There's nothing we can do now. Let's do it." Since the formation had been broken, they could only fight. The final result was still hard to say. Hearing the eighth will of the heavenly way, Hong Lian smiled charmingly. "Eighth Desolate, you're still so impatient. Haven't you heard that haste makes waste? Demonis, I'll tear you to pieces today." Hong Lian and the eighth will of the heavenly way were old rivals. Therefore, after hearing her words, the eighth will of the heavenly way harumphed coldly and struck out with his palm. The eighth will of the heavenly way's mightiness was not something an immortal emperor could compare with. They were already the strongest experts in this heaven and earth, representing the will of the heaven and earth. They could mobilize the energy of the heaven and earth for their own use with just a wave of their hand. Seeing the eighth will of the heavenly way's attack, Hong Lian didn't panic. She smiled charmingly and struck out with her palm as well, colliding with the eighth will of the heavenly way's attack. "Eighth Desolate, you still don't know how to show mercy to the fairer sex. Demonis, don't try to mislead us with your lies," the eighth will of the heavenly way replied coldly after hearing her words. After the collision, neither of them gained the upper hand. Then, the eighth will of the heavenly way took the initiative to attack. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Hong Lian, as if he had teleported. Then, the two of them engaged in a fierce battle. Hong Lian and the eighth will of the heavenly way had already begun to fight. At the same time, Luo Li and the seventh will of the heavenly way were also staring at each other. They were old rivals. Looking at the seventh will of the heavenly way, Luo Li said indifferently, "Seventh Desolate, I really have to thank you. If it wasn't for you, Shao Qin wouldn't have become the heir of the seventh world." Luo Li, don't pretend to be all high and mighty. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. The seventh will of the heavenly way snorted coldly after hearing that. Facing the seventh will of the heavenly way's snort, Luo Li didn't say anything. He still had a faint smile on his face. Then, he directly attacked, sending a palm towards the seventh will of the heavenly way. Facing Luo Li's attack, the seventh will of the heavenly way naturally wouldn't be careless. He said coldly as he attacked, "You Hachibra Senkai say that you represent all living beings. But in reality, your purpose of overthrowing the heavens and the earth is to replace it. You're above all living beings. What's the difference between you and the heavens and the earth?" "You're right. But so what? All living beings in this world need a spiritual sustenance. Your will of the heavenly way has ruled all living beings for so long. It's time for a change." Hearing that, Luo Li didn't refute at all. On the contrary, he openly admitted it. That's right. If the Hachibra Senkai defeated the will of the heavenly way one day, then there was no doubt that the Hachibra Senkai would replace the will of the heavenly way's position and become the ruler of all living beings. They would enjoy the faith of all living beings. To put it bluntly, both sides had the same goal. They both wanted the power of all living beings in this world to become the true ruler of this world. Seeing that Luoli didn't refute and admitted it so easily, the seventh will of the heavenly way snorted coldly. Then let's see if the Hachibara Senkai has the ability to do so. With that, the seventh will of the heavenly way took the initiative to attack. The two of them instantly engaged in a fierce battle. 4 of the most powerful people in this world fought fiercely. For a moment, the world lost its color. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 16:11. Luoli Honglian, the seventh will of the heavenly way, and the eighth will of the heavenly way. The 4 of the most powerful experts in the world were fighting fiercely. The might of their battle was indescribable. However, what was strange was that the aftermath of their fierce battle did not spread out at all. The place where the 4 of them were fighting was confined, and there was no way for it to affect the others. Of course, this was because the 4 of them had already confined the space and isolated the place where they were fighting. It was as if they had temporarily constructed a small world. With the strength of the 4 of them, it was not difficult for them to achieve this. Moreover, judging from the way they fought, they did not use any celestial skills. However, the power of each of their attacks was not inferior to a top grade 3 celestial skill. In fact, when one reached the level of Luoli and the other 3, the so-called celestial skills were not very useful. They were very useless. That was because at their level, every single move they made was comparable to a grade 3 immortal skill. Moreover, there was no need for them to have a fixed state of mind when using their move. They were completely in a state of being able to execute their moves as they wished. Although the punches and palms looked simple, the power of each of their attacks was comparable to a third-grade celestial skill. As a result, there was no need for them to cultivate any celestial skills. The experts from both sides did not interfere in the battle between the 4 of them. After all, they were not qualified to interfere in a battle of this level. The status of Luoli and the other 3 could only be determined by their own strength. As for the others, they had their own opponent. The battle gradually reached its climax. At the same time, Hong Xiu stood outside the battlefield with Xiao Chen in her arms under the protection of Yi Xiao. She did not have any intention of interfering in the battle. In Hong Xiu's heart, she only cared about Xiao Chen. As for the outcome of the battle, she did not care and was powerless to change it. On the other hand, Yi Xiao's reason was even simpler. His mission this time was to protect Virtuous Red. Since Virtuous Red wasn't going to do anything, he naturally wouldn't be so foolish as to charge forward. The battle between the two sides was intense, but Hong Xiu did not pay any attention to it. She had already fed Xiao Chen a healing pill, but because Xiao Chen had continuously burned his bloodline power, his injuries could be said to be extremely severe. Thus, even a simple healing pill would not be of much use in a short period of time. At most, it could only keep Xiao Chen alive. A top-grade immortal pill could only temporarily stabilize Xiao Chen's injuries. Hong Xiu's eyes were still red. She stared at Xiao Chen without blinking. The worry in her eyes made Yi Xiao shake his head repeatedly. Sigh, the girl has grown up. I can't keep her. Girls tend to go outside when they grow up. Yi Xiao sighed helplessly in her heart. Hong Xiu naturally ignored Yi Xiao's expression. She only had Xiao Chen in her heart. She did not have the time to care about anything else. Yi Xiao, Xiao Chen, and Hong Xiu could be said to have completely separated themselves from the battle. However, the others were fighting more and more intensely. The experts of the older generation were fighting fiercely, and so were the younger generation. Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and the others were fighting against the young prodigies of the two realms. During this period of time, everyone's strength had increased significantly with the help of the will of the heavenly way. In the fierce battle, no one held back at all against the young prodigies of the two realms. It was as if they were going all out. Of course, it was the same for the prodigies of the two realms on the other side. The battle became more and more intense. Both sides began to suffer casualties. At this moment, Long Yang and Yu Shujin were fighting fiercely. Long Yang hated the Hachibara Senkai to the core because his memory had been tampered with by the will of the Heavenly Way. Therefore, when he faced Yu Shujin, his personality changed greatly. He was no longer as lazy as before. He threw out a punch and met Yu Shujin's attack head-on. At the same time, Long Yang shouted in a deep voice, "All the bastards of the Seventh Realm deserve it, especially Shao Chen." His hatred for the Seventh Realm and Shao Chen was bone-deep. Yu Shujin said without much expression when she heard that, "You can't kill with your words alone. Humph, then give me your life." Hearing that, Long Yang shouted coldly. Then, a dragon roar shook the sky. Long Yang transformed into his true form, a huge azure dragon. After transforming into his true form, Long Yang's aura surged again. Yu Shujin smiled faintly and said, "This is interesting. However, you can fight with me. You're still far from being able to fight with our heirs." Then, Yu Shujin took the initiative to move forward and slashed out with her sword. Long Yang was even more furious when he heard that. He smashed his huge dragon claw at Yu Shujin. Long Yang and the others hated Shao Chen the most at this moment. However, Yu Shujin said that he was far inferior to Shao Chen. This made Long Yang even angrier. However, this was also true. Because Shao Chen had obtained the power of living beings, not only did he break through to the immortal realm, but he also condensed the heavenly immortal mansion. At this moment, Shao Chen had already widened the gap between him and Long Yang and the others. Of course, if Yu Shujin had obtained the power of living beings, the result would be the same. At this moment, Long Yang would definitely not be able to fight against Yu Shujin. He would not even be able to withstand one attack from Yu Shujin. The power of living beings was the most precious treasure in the world. Unfortunately, the will of the Heavenly Way could not use it. Once one obtained the power of living beings, they would be able to understand everything that the world had done. In a sense, the power of living beings was also a key for all living beings to escape the control of the world. Unfortunately, the will of the Heavenly Way was very afraid of this key. Therefore, it never allowed anyone to touch it. It even made up a lie, saying that the power of living beings was a spiritual crystal vein. Long Yang and Yu Shujin were locked in battle. The others were also locked in battle. However, as the battle was going on, Luoli and the seventh will of the Heavenly Way suddenly changed. After a fierce battle, the seventh will of the Heavenly Way was caught off guard by Luoli's palm. He was obviously at a disadvantage. This was not the first time he had fought with Luoli, but this was the first time that Luoli had forced him to retreat. In the past, when they fought, neither of them had the upper hand. After forcing the seventh will of the Heavenly Way to retreat, Luoli's expression did not change. He said indifferently, "No wonder you are injured. It seems that I will win today's battle." Hearing Luoli's words, the seventh will of the Heavenly Way's expression became extremely gloomy. Injury. Because of his insignificant injury, it became a variable in the battle between him and Luoli. The scale of victory began to tilt towards Luoli's direction. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1612. Because of this small injury, the seventh desolate will of the Heavenly Way was at a disadvantage in front of Luoli. Of course, this small injury was not enough for Luoli to gain much of an advantage. It could only be said that Luoli was slightly suppressing the seventh will of the Heavenly Way. However, although this small injury was insignificant in the short term, if the two of them continued to fight to the death, Luoli had the ability to expand this small advantage infinitely. This was a battle between experts. Sometimes, a small accident could directly determine the outcome of the battle. Right now, the seventh will of the Heavenly Way's small injury was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. Although it was not a big deal now, Luoli had the ability to turn this small advantage into victory. The seventh desolate will of the heavenly way did not doubt this at all. The anger in his heart could not dissipate. It was Xiao Chen again. Or rather, it was Xiao Chen's fault from the beginning. This insignificant ant in the eyes of the seventh will of the heavenly way had caused the seventh will of the heavenly way to suffer defeat time and time again. First, he destroyed the ultimate heaven destruction formation. Now, because of this small advantage, he had landed himself in an awkward situation. Should he continue to fight Luoli to the death or retreat? If he continued to fight to the death, his injury would definitely be expanded by Luoli without limit. When that time came, it was very likely that it would cause irreparable damage. Luoli and the seventh will of the heavenly way's strength were almost on par. This was also why, after so many years of fighting, the two of them could not do anything to each other. However, now, the small injury caused by Xiao Chen had become Luoli's opportunity to win. Unknowingly, Xiao Chen's change of position played a crucial role in the final outcome of this battle. If it wasn't for Xiao Chen, the seventh will of the heavenly way wouldn't have been injured. If the seventh will of the heavenly way hadn't been injured, Luoli wouldn't have been able to gain the upper hand. While Xiao Chen was inconsequential to the battle, the seventh Baron's will of the heavenly path was crucial to the battle. If the seventh Baron's will of the heavenly path were to be defeated, the outcome would be obvious. The seventh wilderness will of the heavenly way knew that he was in a very awkward situation. Similarly, Luoli also knew that the seventh wilderness was in a very awkward situation. Therefore, Luoli did not give seventh desolate will of the heavenly way any chance to retaliate. He took a step forward and attacked seventh desolate. After so many years, there hasn't been a clear winner. Looks like there will be a result today, seventh desolate. Hearing Luoli's words, the seventh will of the heavenly way ground his teeth so hard that they almost broke. The anger in his heart surged like a monstrous wave. The will of the seventh Baron Heavenly Law did not hate Luoli. Instead, it hated Xiao Chen. It was that ant who had turned the tide of the battle. If it had not been for him, the will of the seventh Baron Heavenly Law would not have fallen into such an awkward situation. Facing Luoli's attack, the seventh will of the heavenly way felt depressed. He defended while weighing the pros and cons. If the battle continued, the final outcome wouldn't be ideal. After all, Luoli had already gained a small advantage. However, the seventh will of the heavenly way was unwilling to retreat. Even if they lost this battle, the seventh desolate wouldn't completely fall into the hands of the Hachibara Senkai. After all, the seventh desolate was huge. Moreover, the experts from the seventh and eighth desolate were still there. As such, it wouldn't be easy for the Hachibara Senkai to take over the seventh desolate. However, if they lost this battle, it would mean that the seventh and eighth realms had successfully planted a nail in the seventh desolate. If they retreated from this battle, it would give the experts from the two realms a chance to gain a foothold in the seventh desolate. Once the experts from the seventh and eighth realms gained a foothold, it wouldn't be so easy to drive them out. The flames of war would probably spread to the entire seventh mainland, or even the entire seventh desolate. If they lost the first battle, it would give the seventh and eighth realms a chance to take root in the seventh desolate. Therefore, the seventh will of the heavenly way was unwilling to retreat unless it was absolutely necessary. This was because the seventh will of the heavenly way knew that once the seventh and eighth realms gained a foothold in the seventh desolate, the following battles would be even more difficult. The seventh will of the heavenly way gritted his teeth and fought fiercely with Luoli. However, even if the seventh will of the heavenly way was unwilling to give up, Luoli already had the advantage. As the battle continued, the seventh will of the heavenly way's advantage was constantly being expanded by Luoli. The greater the advantage, the greater the pressure. In the end, the seventh will of the heavenly way had no choice but to make a choice. He could only retreat. If he continued to fight, he would probably be seriously injured. As the will of the heavenly way, if he was seriously injured, who would be able to stop Luoli? The price he would have to pay would be even greater. Forget it. I can only let the Hachibara Senkai take root in the 7th Desolate. As long as the experts of the 7th and 8th Desolate are still here, the outcome is still uncertain. The 7th will of the heavenly way took the initiative to retreat. Then, he shouted at the experts of the 2 desolate lands, "Let's go." In the end, he still gave the order to retreat. Seeing this, Luoli's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He knew that the 7th Desolate would retreat. After all, the 7th Desolate did not dare to fight with his life on the line. Moreover, based on their current situation, if they really fought with their lives on the line, the 7th Desolate would have a higher chance of dying. Once the 7th Desolate fell, even if Luoli was seriously injured and only had one breath left, the 7th Desolate would definitely fall. This was because as long as Luoli recovered from his injuries, without the will of the heavenly way, who in the 7th Desolate would be able to stop him? At that time, whether it was 10 years, 50 years, or 100 years, as long as Luoli recovered from his injuries, the 7th Desolate would be within his reach. The 7th will of the heavenly way obviously knew this, so he did not choose to fight to the death with Luoli. Instead, he chose to retreat. Hearing the 7th will of the heavenly way's words, the experts of the 2 desolate lands quickly retreated, even though they were unwilling. Soon, the battle stopped, and the experts of the 2 desolate lands retreated one after another. Before the 7th will of the heavenly way left, he glared at the unconscious Shao Chen and said coldly to Luoli, "Luoli, don't be happy too early. We don't know who will win yet." "Oh, that's true. However, since you've given us a chance to take root in the 7th Desolate, it won't be so easy for you to drive us away," Luoli replied with a smile. "Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me." Chapter 1613. Now that the 2 worlds had a chance to gain a foothold in the 7th wilderness, it wouldn't be so easy for them to leave. After hearing Luoli's words, the 7th will of the heavenly way naturally understood this logic, but what could he do now? Although he was furious, his rationality kept telling him that now wasn't the time to fight to the death with Luoli. Otherwise, the price he would have to pay would be even greater, and it might even affect the overall situation. Giving the 7th and 8th realms a chance to gain a foothold in the 7th wilderness was something that couldn't be helped. However, as long as the strength of the 2 worlds was still there, the final result was still uncertain. The 7th will of the heavenly way stopped talking to Luoli. He glared coldly at Luoli, then turned to Shao Chen before leaving. The hatred in his eyes was obvious. It was all because of Shao Chen that the current situation happened. Therefore, for the 7th will of the heavenly way, his hatred for Shao Chen could be described as monstrous. Without saying a word, the experts of the 2 worlds retreated. Then, the 7th and 8th will of the heavenly way also chose to retreat. The experts of the 2 worlds retreated after the first battle. Facing such an outcome, the experts of the 7th and 8th realms were naturally very excited. After all, winning this battle meant that they could finally gain a foothold in the 7th wilderness. In a flash, the battle ended. Luoli and Red Lotus came to Shao Chen. Red Lotus said with a bitter smile as she looked at the seriously injured and unconscious Shao Chen. "This little guy really doesn't want to live anymore." With Red Lotus's eyesight, she could naturally tell that Shao Chen suffered such serious injuries because he burned too much of his bloodline power. Indeed, he didn't want to live anymore. But after hearing Red Lotus's words, she looked at her with tear-stained eyes and said, "Mother, can you save Shao Chen?" Red Lotus nodded helplessly at the sight of Hongxiu's reddened eyes. This lass is really devoted to Shao Chen. She gave Shao Chen a simple treatment, but for Shao Chen's current injuries, this treatment obviously didn't have much effect. Shao Chen would need many more treatments and recuperation to fully recover. After all, it wasn't that easy to recover from burning one's bloodline power. This was because the Hachibra Senkai had a strong foundation. If it were other forces like the Taiyang sect or the Taiyang sect, they probably wouldn't be able to heal Shao Qin at all because they didn't have treasures that could restore one's bloodline power. On the same day, the seventh world's Black Palace, the seventh wildernesses of the Heavenly Way. Along with the appearance of the Black Palace, it also meant that the seventh world and the eighth world had truly entered the hinterland of the seventh wilderness. The Black Palace shouldn't be underestimated because it was a supreme treasure. Not only was it the headquarters of the seventh world and the eighth world, but it also had an extremely strong defense. With the presence of the Black Palace, the experts of the two worlds could steadily and slowly nibble away at the entire seventh continent and even the seventh wilderness. Inside the Black Palace, Red Lotus and Luo Li were personally treating Shao Qian's injuries in the cave dwelling that originally belonged to Shao Qian. Both of them first stabilized Shao Qian's injuries with their own spiritual energy, then used some treasures that could restore one's bloodline power to restore Shao Qian's bloodline power. Every treasure that could restore one's bloodline power could be said to be extremely precious. Even the seventh world and the eighth world didn't have too many of them. Of course, this was also because of Hong Xiu. Therefore, Red Lotus was very straightforward and generous this time. She directly took out 5 treasures that could restore one's bloodline power. Shao Qian wasn't from the eighth world, so Red Lotus didn't have to do this at all. However, she couldn't resist her daughter's pleading, and could only nod in the end. With Red Lotus' generosity and Luo Li's 5 treasures that could restore one's bloodline power, Shao Qian's injuries recovered well. After a round of treatment and refining these treasures into pills and feeding them to Shao Qian, Red Lotus got up and looked at Hong Xiu helplessly, saying, "Don't worry, Shao Qian. Alas, boy, if you dare to make my Xiu sad in the future, I'll skin you alive." Red Lotus didn't stop Hong Xiu from having feelings for Shao Qian. After all, Shao Qian could be considered a genius. However, Red Lotus could also see that Shao Qian didn't seem to have any feelings for Hong Xiu. In fact, Red Lotus had already inquired about Shao Qian from Luo Li. She also knew about Shao Qian's experience. To be honest, Red Lotus sympathized with Shao Qian. However, it had already happened, and she couldn't change anything. Forget it, let the young people solve their own problems. Moreover, she had spoiled her daughter too much. She reckoned that Hong Xiu wouldn't listen to anything she said now. Shao Qian's treatment was over. Next, he only needed to continue to take those elixirs that could restore one's bloodline power and slowly recuperate. There shouldn't be any major problems after that. Red Lotus stood up and prepared to leave. Seeing this, she didn't react at all. She just stared at Shao Qian. Seeing that her mother was ignoring her, Hong Lian pouted and snorted in dissatisfaction. Then, she walked out of the room. After leaving Shao Qian's abode, Red Lotus and Luo Li were walking side by side in the Black Palace when Red Lotus suddenly asked, "What about Shao Qian's cultivation base? Say, aren't you afraid that he'll fight it out with you after finding out that you lied to him? After all, that little fellow's only hope now is probably to revive his family." Upon hearing Red Lotus' words, Luo Li was taken aback. Then, he shook his head and forced a smile. "I didn't have a choice. With the situation back then, if I didn't give him hope, he would have been crippled. Sigh. How can the dead come back to life?" Red Lotus let out a soft sigh. Unaware of the conversation between Red Lotus and Luo Li, Shao Qian was still in a coma. In his coma, Shao Qian saw Qin Shuru, Flower Fairy, Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu, Shao Qing, Bai Ryue, and even Qing Yao and Qing Luo. Hong Xiu, who had been taking care of Shao Qian by his bedside, looked at Shao Qian with an aggrieved expression and pouted when she saw that he was still mumbling the names of the other women while he was unconscious. She said with great dissatisfaction, "Brother, you're the one who's been taking care of me. What's wrong with that? I've been taking care of you so painstakingly, but you only think about other women. You don't even have me in your heart." Red Lotus felt a little jealous, and tears of grievance unknowingly rolled down her cheek. For some unknown reason, she felt really uncomfortable when she heard Xiao Chen repeatedly mumbling the names of Qin Shuru and the other ladies. "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1614. Xiao Chen naturally did not know about Hongxiu's jealousy. He was currently unconscious. When Xiao Chen saw Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls, he could not help but smile. Looking at the unconscious Xiao Chen, a smile suddenly appeared on Hongxiu's face. This was the first time Hongxiu had seen Xiao Chen smile. Ever since she met Xiao Chen, Hongxiu had never seen Xiao Chen smile. She pursed her lips and said fiercely, "Humph, one day I will walk into your heart." Hongxiu was not stupid. She naturally knew that Xiao Chen had never had any feelings for her. However, she did not know why, but she liked Xiao Chen. At the same time, she was confident that she could make Xiao Chen fall in love with her. Xiao Chen was seriously injured and unconscious. On the other side, the experts from the 7th and 8th Wilderness who had retreated had gathered in Haotian City. It had temporarily become the headquarters of the experts from the 2 Wilderness. However, at this moment, the 7th Will of the Heavenly Way was sitting on the main seat in the main hall of Haotian City. Below him, a group of experts from the 7th Wilderness stood respectfully. At the front of the group, the Wine Taoist was prostrating on the ground. In the previous battle, the Wine Taoist did not kill Xiao Chen. He even saved Xiao Chen's life. The 7th Will of the Heavenly Way naturally knew about this. Now that the battle was over, and the 7th and 8th Wilderness had been defeated, although they did not suffer any serious losses, it still gave the 7th and 8th realms a chance to gain a foothold on the 7th mainland. It was not hard to imagine that now that the 7th realm's Black Palace had descended on the 7th mainland, it would be very difficult to drive them out in the future. This battle would probably not end in a short period of time. The 7th mainland, and even the entire 7th Wilderness, would probably suffer from the flames of war for a long time to come. Even though the Wine Taoist was not responsible for all of this, the fact that he had let Xiao Chen escape had indeed infuriated the 7th Baron's will. Therefore, the Wine Taoist was being held accountable. The 7th Will of the Heavenly Way looked deeply at the kneeling Wine Taoist and said flatly, "Xiao Chen not only killed his father and wife, but he also betrayed the 7th realm. He is a traitor, and now the heir of the 7th realm. Wine Taoist, you secretly let such a villain go. What do you have to say?" The 7th Will of the Heavenly Way was familiar with the Wine Taoist. After all, the Taoist was an old man who had been by his side. Originally, it trusted the Wine Taoist a lot, but because the Wine Taoist had let Xiao Chen go without permission, the 7th Baron's Will of the Heavenly Path began to doubt his loyalty. Of course, to say that the Wine Taoist was no longer loyal to the 7th Will of the Heavenly Way was completely false. The only reason the Wine Taoist had let Xiao Chen go was because he could not bear to kill Xiao Chen. Hearing the 7th Will of the Heavenly Way's words, the Wine Taoist's expression was calm. The drunkenness on his face had completely vanished. He spoke with a serious expression, which was rare for him. "Heavenly Way, Xiao Chen killed his father and wife and betrayed the 7th realm. There must be more to this than meets the eye. As Xiao Chen's master, I know that Xiao Chen is not such a person. I let Xiao Chen go this time because I hope that Xiao Chen can turn over a new leaf. I have no other intentions," the Wine Taoist said. The Wine Taoist said, pleading for mercy on Xiao Chen's behalf. However, the 7th Baron's Will of the Heavenly Path grew even colder after hearing what the Wine Taoist said. This was not the first time the Wine Taoist was pleading for Xiao Chen. Ever since Xiao Chen had betrayed the 7th realm, the Wine Taoist had pleaded for Xiao Chen many times in the hopes that the Will of the Heavenly Way would forgive Xiao Chen. Unfortunately, the wine Taoist had no idea what was going on. It was impossible for the seventh will of the heavenly way to spare Xiaochen. Now, the wine Taoist was pleading for Xiaochen in front of so many experts from the seventh will of the heavenly way, which completely infuriated the seventh will of the heavenly way. Foolish! A traitor is a traitor. Xiaochen killed his father and wife and betrayed the seventh realm. How can I spare him? Fine. Since you say that you are the master of that traitor, I will punish you as well. As he spoke, the will of the heavenly way pointed his finger. A five-colored light flashed and instantly pierced through the wine Taoist's chest, sending him flying. The wine Taoist spat out a mouthful of blood after being sent flying by the finger. Even so, he still spoke. Heavenly way, there must be more to the matter of my disciple, Xiaochen. I implore the heavenly way to give Xiaochen another chance. Even though he had been injured by the will of the heavenly way, the wine Taoist still had to plead for Xiaochen. He only hoped that Xiaochen would repent and be saved. He had no other thoughts. He was still loyal to the will of the heavenly way, but the wine Taoist's words had completely angered the will of the heavenly way. The will of the heavenly way looked at the stubborn wine Taoist who insisted on pleading for Xiaochen. A murderous intent finally flashed in the eyes of the seventh desolate. He gritted his teeth and spoke coldly. Fine, fine. Since you want to plead for that traitor of yours, I will fulfill your wish. It was obvious that the will of the heavenly way wanted to kill the wine Taoist. However, just as the will of the heavenly way was about to kill the wine Taoist, many other experts from the seventh desolate spoke up. Heavenly way, although the wine Taoist has made a mistake, he doesn't deserve to die. I hope the heavenly way will show mercy. I hope the heavenly way will show mercy. The wine Taoist just can't let go of his former master-disciple relationship. However, his loyalty to the heavenly way and the seventh desolate is obvious to all. Everyone stood up to plead for the wine Taoist. After being in the seventh desolate for so many years, the wine Taoist naturally had many good friends. At this moment, everyone knew that the will of the heavenly way wanted to kill wine Taoist Ji. Naturally, they couldn't care less and all spoke up to plead for the wine Taoist. Hearing everyone pleading for wine Taoist, the seventh desolate's will of the heavens knew that this was not the best time to kill wine Taoist. Otherwise, many of the seventh desolate's experts would be disappointed. The will of the heavenly way glanced coldly at the wine Taoist. Then, he reached out with his palm. A five-colored light instantly enveloped the wine Taoist and sealed his cultivation. The wine Taoist did not let go of the will of the heavenly way's actions. He allowed his cultivation to be sealed. With his cultivation sealed, the will of the heavenly way looked at the wine Taoist and snorted. Humph, I'll spare your life this time. Go to the black prison and think it through. Come and see me when you've thought it through. Men, lock the wine Taoist in the black prison. Without my orders, no one is allowed to approach or visit him. In the end, he did not kill the wine Taoist. Instead, he sealed his cultivation and locked him in the black prison. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 16:15. Hearing the words of the seventh wilderness will of the heavenly way, 2 experts from the seventh wilderness stepped forward and prepared to take the wine Taoist to the black prison. Even so, the wine Taoist still pleaded for Xiaochen. Heaven's way, there must be a reason behind my disciple Xiaochen's death. I hope the heaven's way can be merciful and forgive my disciple this time. I will definitely persuade him to repent. The wine Taoist only wanted Xiaochen to repent. Unfortunately, he didn't know that this wasn't a matter of whether Xiaochen would repent or not. The will of the heavenly way wouldn't allow Xiaochen to live in this world. Seeing that the wine Taoist was still pleading for Xiaochen, the will of the heavenly way was really angry. He pointed a finger and immediately cut off the wine Taoist's left arm. Enough. I must kill Xiaochen. You'd better think carefully. Otherwise, you'll stay in the black prison for the rest of your life. After cutting off the wine Taoist's arm, the wine Taoist was taken away by two experts from the seventh wilderness. Because of the wine Taoist, the seventh wasteland's will of the heavens was in an extremely bad mood. Looking at the people below, he could not be bothered to say anything. He left a sentence and disappeared from the hall. If anyone dares to plead for Shao Chun in the future, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Let Shao Chun return to the seventh wilderness? Was that possible? Even if Shao Chun was willing, the will of the heavenly way probably wouldn't be willing. Hearing the words of the will of the heavenly way, everyone present sighed helplessly. Those who were closer to the wine Taoist, such as Shun Batian and Granny Tianxiu, had a look of helplessness in their eyes. In their eyes, the wine Taoist was too stubborn this time. Shao Chun had already betrayed the seventh wilderness and was now the heir of the seventh world. The wine Taoist still insisted on pleading for Shao Chun. Wasn't he looking for trouble? Everyone left the hall one after another. As for wine Taoist, his cultivation had been sealed, and his left arm had been severed. He was directly locked up in the black prison. The first battle had ended, and the following developments were just as the seventh wilderness will of the heavenly way had expected. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. During this month, countless battles had broken out between the two sides. The seventh realm and the eighth realm had indeed gained a foothold on the seventh mainland. With the Black Palace outside the Celestial Domain Gate as the core, the experts of the two worlds continued to spread out in all directions. They began to invade and occupy the major cities of the seventh mainland. Of course, the experts of the seventh realm and the eighth realm didn't mean that they would send people to guard the cities. Instead, they wanted to seize the various cultivation resources in the cities. After all, there weren't many experts in the two worlds. There were only 5,000 or 6,000 people in total. With such a small number of people, it was obviously impossible for them to divide their forces and occupy the major cities. Therefore, Luoli and Honglian didn't care about the ownership of the cities. As long as they conquered the cities and took the cultivation resources, that would be enough. As for whether the people in the cities would still choose to believe in the will of the heavenly way or not, that wasn't Luoli and Honglian's concern. They knew that the will of the heavenly way's position in the hearts of the people was no different from that of a god. Therefore, it was impossible and unrealistic to change the minds of the people in a short period of time. Therefore, the simplest way was naturally to seize the various cultivation resources on the seventh mainland. This way, the two worlds would be able to increase their battle strength. The battle hadn't spread to the entire seventh mainland yet. Moreover, the people of the seventh and eighth desolates were doing their best to resist the plundering attacks of the seventh and eighth realms. However, as time went by, the area affected by the battle became wider and wider. With the Black Palace of the seventh realm as the center, the flames of war had almost burned half of the seventh mainland. In the outside world, the two sides were locked in a battle of life and death. In the Black Palace, in Shao Chen's cave residence, Shao Chun had already woken up half a month ago. However, because he had burned his bloodline power, Shao Chen's body was still very weak. He had been in a coma for half a month and then recuperating for another half a month. During this time, he had the help of pills. However, Shao Chun was still very weak. His injuries had only recovered by about 50 to 60%. It had been a month, and even with Shao Chen's physical body, he still hadn't fully recovered. It had to be said that this injury was definitely the most serious one that Shao Chun had ever suffered in his life. During this month, Hong Xiu had never left Shao Chen's side, including the half a month when Shao Chen was in a coma. Hong Xiu's meticulous care touched Shao Chen's heart. Just think about it, with Hong Xiu's status, when had she ever taken care of someone like this? Although he still didn't accept Hong Xiu's thoughts and intentions, at least the distance between Shao Chen and Hong Xiu had narrowed a little. When he was with Hong Xiu, Chen would at least speak a few words from time to time. Quietly recuperating, Chen didn't care about anything that was happening in the outside world. While Chen was recuperating, the battle in the outside world had become more intense. Both sides had already suffered the death of immortal realm mighty figures. On this day, in the Black Prison, Shen Batian and Granny Tianxiu came to the cell where Wine Daoist was locked up. The two of them had begged the seventh wilderness will of the heavenly way for a long time before they finally got the chance to meet Wine Daoist. Now that more than a month had passed, Wine Daoist, who was locked up in the Black Prison, could only be described as extremely miserable. His chest was injured, his left arm was broken, and his cultivation was sealed. After more than a month, Wine Daoist seemed to have become a completely different person. In the dark and damp cell, Wine Daoist sat on a pile of weeds with his hair disheveled. When he saw Shen Batian and Granny Tianxiu enter the cell, he only raised his head to take a glance but didn't say anything. Seeing Wine Daoist in such a state, Shen Batian and Granny Tianxiu, who were close friends for many years, felt terrible. In the end, Shen Batian spoke first. "Old drunkard, what are you thinking? For a traitor, you put yourself in such a state. Is it really worth it?" "That's right, old drunkard. We know how you feel. However, what happened between you and Chen is in the past. He's no longer from the seventh wilderness, nor is he your disciple. Why do you have to put yourself in such a state for him?" The two of them tried to persuade him. However, Wine Daoist slowly raised his head. Although his face was covered in blood and dirt, his eyes were still filled with determination. "There's no past. A master for a day is a master for life. Since I'm Chen's master, no matter what Chen did, I have the responsibility. Therefore, let me take all the punishment for him. I only hope that the heavenly way can give him a way out. As for the rest, let me, the master, bear all the responsibility. Sorry for being late, brothers. I'm going to make up for the fourth update." Chapter 16:16. While it took a lot of effort for the Wine Daoist to say those words, they were extremely firm. His memories had not been tampered with by the will of the heavens. As such, the Wine Daoist truly hoped that Chen would change his mind. However, Shen Batian and Tianxiu Granny frowned when they heard his words. This time, the two of them were able to meet Wine Daoist because they had begged him repeatedly. Secondly, the will of the heavenly way hoped to persuade Chen through Shen Batian and Tianxiu Granny. After much consideration, the will of the heavenly way decided not to kill Wine Daoist. After all, it was a special period now. Moreover, Wine Daoist was an immortal venerable who was about to break through to the immortal emperor realm. If he was killed now, it would have a huge impact. Of course, the most important thing was that the seventh will of the heavenly way understood that Wine Daoist was only doing this because of his master-disciple relationship with Chen. Wine Daoist had not betrayed him. Since Wine Daoist was still loyal to him, the seventh will of the heavenly way had no reason to kill Wine Daoist. Therefore, the will of the heavenly way wanted to persuade Wine Daoist to forget Chen through Shen Batian and Tianxiu Granny, who were his best friends. Unfortunately, looking at the Wine Daoist's current state, it would be impossible for him to forget his past relationship with Chen as his disciple. Since he was willing to bear all the responsibilities for Chen, how could Wine Daoist give up on Chen? Shen Batian and Tianxiu Granny sighed softly when they heard Wine Daoist's words. "Old drunkard, you know the temper of the heavenly way. It means what it says. If you persist like this, do you really plan to stay in this dark prison for the rest of your life?" "Yes, since Chen has already betrayed us, your master-disciple relationship with him has already ended. Why do you have to do this?" The two of them tried their best to persuade him. However, the Wine Daoist did not listen to a single word they said. In the end, he only said a single sentence indifferently. Xiao Qin is my disciple. You don't have to say any more. I'm waiting for the heavenly Tao to change its mind. If the heavenly Tao doesn't agree, what will you do? Hearing that, Shen Batian said helplessly. If that's the case, I will spend the rest of my life in this black prison. Isn't this considered as making up for some of my disciples' sins? Hearing this, the wine Taoist indifferently said. Seeing that wine Taoist had made up his mind, Shen Batian and Granny Tianxiu looked at each other. Both of them had no other choice but to leave. The wine Taoist valued his relationship with Xiao Qin very much. As such, it was very difficult to persuade him. Shen Batian and Granny Tianxiu could only give up for now. They planned to slowly persuade the wine Taoist in the future. Unaware of the wine Taoist's matter, the outside world was already in a mess. At that moment, Xiao Qin was in seclusion in his cave dwelling. It had been almost 2 months since he woke up. With the help of various immortal pills from the 7th and 8th realms, as well as the terrifying recovery ability of Xiao Qin's tempered battle body, Xiao Qin's injuries were finally healed. Not only that, but Xiao Qin also benefited from the disaster this time. His cultivation had reached the brink of a breakthrough. This time, Xiao Qin's goal was to break through to the initial success of the immortal realm. Breaking through a small realm was not too difficult. Therefore, Xiao Qin chose to go into seclusion in his cave dwelling to break through. In the room, Xiao Qin sat cross-legged on a futon with his eyes closed. The aura on his body gradually became violent. It was the sign that he was about to break through. As time passed, the aura on Xiao Qin's body became more and more violent. He was getting closer and closer to breaking through. The surrounding spiritual energy was madly absorbed into Xiao Qin's body. There was already a faint blood-red glow around him. As the saying goes, there can be no construction without destruction. According to the time that Xiao Qin took to break through to the immortal realm, it was impossible for him to break through to the initial success of the immortal realm so quickly. However, this time, Xiao Qin recklessly burned the power of his bloodline. Although he was severely injured, from another perspective, Xiao Qin benefited from the disaster and touched the threshold of breaking through. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. After 10 days of seclusion, Xiao Qin's body finally let out a muffled sound. His cultivation also began to increase in an instant. He quickly broke through the threshold of the initial success of the immortal realm and reached the initial success of the immortal realm. He had finally broken through successfully. The breakthrough this time did not take too much effort from Xiao Qin. It was not an exaggeration to say that success came naturally. Xiao Qin slowly opened his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. A trace of satisfaction flashed through his eyes. A breakthrough in cultivation meant that his strength had increased. As a result, he was a little closer to the will of the heavenly way. He was also a step closer to taking revenge and reviving his family. Killing the 7th wilderness will of the heavenly way and reviving his family was Xiao Qin's only wish and goal right now. When Xiao Qin successfully broke through, Hong Xiu hurriedly pushed open the door and rushed in. Seeing that Xiao Qin had successfully broken through, Hong Xiu smiled and said, "You broke through successfully? That's great." During the 10 days that Xiao Qin had been in seclusion, Hong Xiu came almost every day. As a result, as soon as Xiao Qin broke through, Hong Xiu came in immediately. Looking at the smile on Hong Xiu's face, it was as if she was happier than him that he had successfully broken through. Although there was still not much emotion on his face, there was not even a trace of a smile. However, when he looked at Hong Xiu, the coldness in his eyes lessened greatly. Xiao Qin nodded gently and said, "Yes." Now, Xiao Qin would only show a trace of patience when facing Hong Xiu. Apart from Hong Xiu, Xiao Qin would keep everyone at arm's length. Seeing Xiao Qin nod, Hong Xiu took the initiative to come to Xiao Qin's side. She smiled coquettishly and said, "Since you've successfully broken through, we should celebrate." Xiao Chen no longer had much of a grudge against Hongxiu. Of course, they were not close to each other, but Hongxiu was already very satisfied with just this point alone. She knew that Xiao Chen's heart seemed to have set up countless defenses. His entire heart was tightly guarded, and no one could enter. After this period of hard work, at least Xiao Chen had slowly begun to accept her. Or rather, he had gotten used to having her by his side. Just this point alone was enough to make Hongxiu extremely happy. As soon as she finished speaking, Hongxiu ran out in a hurry. Obviously, she was going to get someone to prepare the dishes. Seeing that Hongxiu was even happier than him, a strange look flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes. Xiao Chen could naturally sense Hongxiu's feelings for him. However, he really could not accept her now. The matter of Qin Shiru's 4 daughters and their parents being killed was like a huge mountain pressing down on Xiao Chen's heart. Xiao Chen would not be able to accept anyone else until he had moved the mountain away from him. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 16-17. In everyone's eyes, Beauty Hongxiu was a foolish woman. That's right, she was indeed a foolish woman. She actually loved Xiao Chen to this extent. Moreover, from the day they met, Beauty Hongxiu had always been the one doing everything for Xiao Chen. As for Xiao Chen, he had never done anything for Beauty Hongxiu. Thinking about it, with Beauty Hongxiu's status, why would she go to this extent for a man? There were many men who admired her, but Beauty Hongxiu only had eyes for Xiao Chen. She was indeed foolish. She was so foolish that she probably didn't even know why she treated Xiao Chen so well and valued him so much. He didn't know how to deal with Beauty Hongxiu. Of course, the current Xiao Chen didn't have the time to think about these things. Since Beauty Hongxiu liked to be by his side, he would let her be. Perhaps one day, she would be annoyed and leave on her own when she got tired of him. Xiao Chen stopped thinking about Beauty Hongxiu and walked out of the room. Beauty Hongxiu had also prepared some food and wine. The two of them started drinking in the pavilion in the courtyard. Of course, Beauty Hongxiu was the one talking throughout the entire process. Xiao Chen was silent. At most, he would reply with a few ends as a form of acknowledgement. Xiao Chen, the battle outside is so fierce. Who do you think will win in the end? Xiao Chen, how are your injuries? Are they really healed? Why don't I get Miracle Dr. Shui to take a look at you again? Beauty Hongxiu was obviously very happy to be with Xiao Chen. She kept talking about Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen only responded indifferently. He didn't say much. In the pavilion, Beauty Hongxiu was like an innocent fairy. She wore a red dress and chattered nonstop. Xiao Chen, who was beside her, was as indifferent as usual. He would occasionally nod his head in response to Beauty Hongxiu. It was a very strange scene, but judging from the smile on Hongxiu's face, she was probably really happy because she could be together with Xiao Chen. After the breakthrough, Xiao Chen celebrated with Hongxiu. Of course, this celebration was just Hongxiu's idea. For Xiao Chen, there was nothing to celebrate or even to be happy about. Because he hadn't taken revenge and his family hadn't been resurrected yet, he couldn't find any reason to be happy. After a night of silence, Hongxiu directly stayed in Xiao Chen's cave dwelling. Hong Lian did not say anything about this, and when Xiao Chen saw that Hongxiu insisted, he let her be. After all, the cave dwelling was huge, and it was not a problem to have Hongxiu stay in it. It was a very peaceful night. Although the outside world was in chaos, the Black Palace was still very peaceful. After all, this was the headquarters of the 7th realm and the 8th realm. The experts of the 2 realms didn't dare to cause trouble here. Therefore, the battle didn't affect the Black Palace. The next morning, Xiao Chen began to cultivate early. Since he came to the 7th realm, Xiao Chen had always been like this. It seemed that only by cultivating could he forget the troubles in his heart and stop himself from thinking about Qin Shiru, his 4 daughters, and his parents. The people around Xiao Qin were already used to his almost masochistic cultivation. Therefore, the maids didn't find it strange. However, on this day, when Xiao Qin was cultivating, Luoli took the initiative to visit him. Seeing that Luoli came in person, the maids responded respectfully. "Greetings, Realm Lord. Where's Xiao Qin?" Luoli didn't pay much attention to the greetings of the maidservants. He simply nodded his head and said. Knowing that Xiao Qin was cultivating in the courtyard, Luoli didn't say anything and strode in. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw that Xiao Qin was indeed cultivating. Feeling that Luoli had come, Xiao Qin stopped and looked at Luoli calmly. Although Luoli was the realm lord, Xiao Qin didn't show the slightest respect when facing him. He was always cold and indifferent. Luoli didn't care about this. Seeing that Xiao Qin was looking at him, Luoli said with a smile, "I have something to tell you." The two of them came to the pavilion in the courtyard and sat down. Looking at Xiao Qin, Luoli asked first, "Have you made a breakthrough in your cultivation?" Luoli saw through Xiao Qin's cultivation with a single glance. Xiao Qin nodded slightly in response to Luoli's question and said nothing more. Seeing this, Luoli continued to ask, "Have you recovered from your injuries?" "Yes." Hearing this, Xiao Qin replied, "That's good. That's good. There's something I need you to do. Right now, our 2 realms and 2 desolates are fighting everywhere. We really don't have enough manpower. There's a city that needs your help. I've already checked it out. There are only 3 immortal realm cultivators guarding the city. The rest are all below the immortal realm. I think it shouldn't be a problem for you to lead the younger generation of the 7th realm there," said Luoli. More than 2 months had passed. The war between the 2 realms and the 2 desolates had already entered a white-hot stage. Both sides were fighting fiercely everywhere in the 7th mainland. The experts of the 7th realm and the 8th realm had already scattered. Now that Luoli didn't have anyone he could use, he asked Xiao Qin to do it. With Xiao Qin's current cultivation and the fact that Xiao Qin had the heavenly immortal mansion and absorbed the power of all living beings, it shouldn't be a problem for him to face 3 immortal realm experts. Hearing Luoli's words, Xiao Qin nodded without hesitation. "Okay. When do we set off?" Xiao Qin had no feelings for the 7th desolate. Now that he was the heir of the 7th realm, it was understandable for him to fight for the 7th realm. Therefore, Xiao Qin agreed without hesitation. However, hearing Xiao Qin's words, Luoli smiled and said, "Don't rush. You can decide after you hear me out." He motioned for Xiao Qin not to rush. Hearing that, Xiao Qin sat back down and waited for Luoli's next words. Looking at Xiao Qin, Luoli was silent for a moment before he spoke slowly. "The city that I want you to attack is called Yanfeng City. It's not a big city, but it's very close to us, so we need to take it down. Of course, the guards in Yanfeng City aren't strong, so there shouldn't be a problem for you to go," but Luoli paused for a moment, then continued, "But the 3 immortal realm experts guarding Yanfeng City are Yinyangzi, the Dragon Emperor, and Xing Zhantian. I know about your relationship with them in the past, so think about it yourself. If you don't want to, don't force it. It's the same to let Yi Xiao go after he comes out of seclusion. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 16-18. Yanfeng City was not a big city, nor was it a strategic location. It was only because Yanfeng City was very close to the gate of the Immortal Realm that Luoli wanted to take down Yanfeng City. At the very least, he had to destroy it. After all, how could he allow others to sleep beside him? At first, Luoli did not want Xiao Qin to take action, because Yi Xiao would lead people there. Unfortunately, Yi Xiao was the same as Xiao Qin. He was now in seclusion to break through to the initial Immortal Realm, and had not come out yet. Luoli did not want to drag this out, so he looked for Xiao Qin. Of course, this did not mean that he had to force Xiao Qin to attack Yanfeng City. As Luoli said, if Xiao Chen was not willing, then forget it. It was the same when Yi Xiao came out of seclusion. He told Xiao Chen the truth without any reservation. As for the choice, it was all up to Xiao Chen. When Luoli said that the 3 immortal realm masters guarding Yanfeng City were Yin Yangzi, Dragon Emperor, and Xing Zhantian, Xiao Chen was indeed slightly stunned. Although he had seen the 3 of them before, Xiao Chen did not fight with the 3 of them at that time. He did not even come into contact with them. This time, the situation was obviously different. If Xiao Chen agreed, then the matter of attacking Yanfeng City would be decided by Xiao Chen alone. At that time, Xiao Chen would obviously have to face Yin Yangzi and the other 2. Xing Zhantian was still fine, but Yin Yangzi and Dragon Emperor, one was the patriarch of the Heavenly Note Taiyang sect, who had helped him a lot, and the other was Long Qing's father. Could Xiao Chen really do it? Seeing that Xiao Chen had fallen into silence, Luoli did not urge him. Instead, he quietly waited for Xiao Chen's answer. He thought that Xiao Chen would hesitate for a long time, but Luoli did not expect that in less than 10 breaths, Xiao Chen would make up his mind. He still looked at Luoli indifferently and said, "I'll go. When do we leave?" "You can make your own arrangements. This is the information of Yanfeng City. You can take as many people as you want. It's also up to you to decide when to leave." Seeing that Xiao Chen made a decision so quickly, Luoli was a little surprised. However, he quickly came back to his senses and handed the information of Yanfeng City to Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen could decide all the matters of Yanfeng City by himself. There was no need to report to Luoli. Luoli only had one request for Yanfeng City, and that was to destroy it and bring back the cultivation resources in Yanfeng City. Luoli did not care about the process. He only wanted the result. Everything was up to Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded in agreement. Then, Luoli did not stay for long and directly left. After all, now that the war had broken out, Luoli had a lot of things to do. After Luoli left, Xiao Chen casually flipped through the information of Yanfeng City. Indeed, as Luoli said, the defense of Yanfeng City was not strong. Other than Yin Yangzi and the other 2 immortal realm masters, there were no other powerful figures. Moreover, Yanfeng City's city defense array was only a low-level saint-level array. This level of array, in front of the current Xiao Chen, was almost equivalent to an empty shell. It did not have any effect at all. It would not be difficult for Xiao Chen to take down Yanfeng City. The only thing he needed to consider was how to deal with Yin Yangzi and the other 2. However, if it was the Xiao Chen of the past, he might have been conflicted and hesitant. But now, Xiao Chen would not. This was also the reason why Xiao Chen made a decision in less than 10 breaths of time. To resurrect his family, he had to kill the 7th wilderness will of the Heavenly Way. Whoever dared to stop him was his enemy. And when dealing with enemies, he naturally had to kill them. Xiao Chen would not show mercy to anyone who stood in his way. After destroying the information about Yanfeng City, Xiao Chen called a maid and ordered her to find Yu Shujin. Luoli's words were very clear. This time, the forces that Xiao Chen could use to attack Yanfeng City were only the young geniuses of the 7th realm. Soon, Yu Shujin came in front of Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen did not waste time. He briefly told Yu Shujin about Yanfeng City and asked her to choose her own people. They would set off early the next morning. Xiao Chen left all the trivial matters to Yu Shujin. As for Xiao Chen's orders, Yu Shujin did not refuse and simply agreed. Yu Shujin left. Xiao Chen did not take the matter of Yanfeng City to heart. Although it was obvious that he would meet Yin Yangzi and the others head-on this time, and even a life-and-death battle was unavoidable, so what? If Yin Yangzi and the others insisted on stopping him, Xiao Chen could only kill them. After a silent night, early the next morning, Xiao Chen woke up early from his cultivation. He was about to go to the main square to meet with the others, but Hong Xiu was one step ahead and blocked Xiao Chen's path. Outside the courtyard, Hong Xiu looked at Xiao Chen and said firmly, "I want to go too." Hong Xiu had obviously heard that Xiao Chen was going to attack Yanfeng City, so she had been waiting here since early in the morning. Hearing Hong Xiu's words, Xiao Chen looked at her for a moment and then said indifferently, "Okay." He did not reject Hong Xiu. Of course, Xiao Chen also knew that with this unruly lady's character, even if he did not agree, Hong Xiu would obviously follow him. So he might as well agree directly. He and Hong Xiu went to the main square. When Xiao Chen and the others arrived, hundreds of young geniuses from the seventh realm had already gathered here and were waiting. However, when everyone gathered here saw Xiao Chen, a look of dissatisfaction appeared in many people's eyes. To put it bluntly, although Xiao Chen had been the heir of the seventh realm for a long time, many young geniuses from the seventh realm were still dissatisfied with Xiao Chen. In addition, this was the first time Xiao Chen had led them to battle, so it was not strange that they were dissatisfied. Xiao Chen saw the look of dissatisfaction in their eyes, but he was too lazy to say anything. As long as these people did not make things difficult for him, Xiao Chen could not be bothered with them at all. It was a pity that Xiao Chen could not be bothered with them. However, there were some people who did not know what was good for them. Seeing Xiao Chen approaching the crowd, a young man from the Ghost Clan in front of the crowd said coldly, "I think it's better to let senior brother you command this battle. Otherwise, if some people screw it up, won't we die for nothing?" The young man from the Ghost Clan had a look of contempt and mockery. He looked down on Xiao Chen and naturally did not want to listen to Xiao Chen's orders. He thought that he came out to show his strength to Xiao Chen, but no one expected that as soon as the young man finished speaking, Xiao Chen directly slapped the young man in front of everyone with a loud bang. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1619. Without any warning, the young man from the Ghost Clan was sent flying by Xiao Chen's slap. The crowd was stunned for a moment before someone shouted, "Xiao Chen, what do you mean? Can't you even speak?" The young man from the Ghost Clan had only spoken a few words before he was sent flying by Xiao Chen's slap. The others were naturally displeased by this. Xiao Chen had no intention of answering the young man's cold question. Instead, he turned to look at the young man indifferently. The young man looked back at Xiao Chen with an unyielding expression when he sensed Xiao Chen's gaze. However, Yu Shujin's expression had changed drastically. Yu Shujin could be said to be the person who understood Xiao Chen the most, apart from Hong Xiu. Therefore, when she saw Xiao Chen's expression, Yu Shujin immediately stood in front of the young man and spoke with a fawning smile. "Senior Xiao Chen, let's set off first. Let's talk on the way, all right?" Yu Shujin knew that Xiao Chen was about to draw his sword and kill someone. Yu Shujin did not doubt Xiao Chen's murderous intent at all. After all, Xiao Chen was someone who even dared to kill Yi Xiao, let alone the rest of them. Yu Shujin pleaded for leniency while Hong Xiu tugged at Xiao Chen's sleeve gently. It was obvious that she was hinting to Xiao Chen that he should not go. After being dissuaded by the two of them, Xiao Chen glanced at the young man indifferently before retracting his gaze. Yu Shujin could not help but heave a sigh of relief when she saw this scene. Xiao Chen glanced at the young geniuses present and said indifferently, "I don't need all of you. Those who don't want to go can leave now." Xiao Chen could tell that many of these people were not convinced by him. Regarding this, Xiao Chen could not be bothered to argue with them. Since they were not convinced, then there was no need to go. When they heard Xiao Chen's indifferent tone and Xiao Chen's overbearing actions, many people in the crowd were naturally dissatisfied. Very quickly, over 100 people stood out. They were clearly unwilling to listen to Xiao Chen's orders. They would rather die than submit. Seeing these people step forward, Yu Shujin's expression turned ugly, and she wanted to scold them. Of course, Yu Shujin wasn't scolding them because she was worried about Xiao Chen. Instead, she was worried about them. She knew Xiao Chen's temper very well. Yu Shujin also knew that Xiao Qin wasn't someone who would keep quiet after suffering a loss. These hundreds of young geniuses had humiliated Xiao Qin in public. It would be strange if Xiao Qin would let them go. Just as she was about to scold them and give them a way out, before Yu Shujin could speak, Xiao Qin spoke first. Very well, you don't have to go this time. Furthermore, from today onwards, the seventh realm will no longer provide any cultivation resources for you. This is what I said. With one sentence, everyone present was dumbfounded, especially those who stood out to openly oppose Xiao Qin. At this moment, they were all dumbfounded. Only Yu Shujin smiled bitterly. As expected, she knew that Xiao Qin was definitely not a magnanimous person. He directly cut off these people's cultivation resources. Think about it, without cultivation resources, what could they do even if they were talented? This was just like how a clever housewife couldn't cook without rice. Even if one's culinary skills were superb, without ingredients, how could one make a dish? As for asking them to look for cultivation resources by themselves, it was even more of a joke. The reason why the strength of sect disciples was generally much higher than that of individual cultivators was very simple. It was because of cultivation resources. Sect disciples didn't have to worry about cultivation resources, but individual cultivators were different. They had to personally go to various dangerous places and risk their lives in search of various resources. As a result, individual cultivators naturally had no more time to cultivate. With one sentence, it could be said that he had cut off the future of more than 100 heavens' prides. As soon as his voice fell, Xiao Qin didn't say anything more. He directly turned around and prepared to leave. Those who didn't stand out to oppose Xiao Qin before were also rejoicing at this moment. Just as Xiao Qin was about to leave, more than 100 people recovered one after another. Among them, there were even people who shouted angrily, "Xiao Qin, who do you think you are? What right do you have to cut off our cultivation resources? We are all from the seventh realm. Do you think we can cut off our cultivation resources just like that?" Since their cultivation resources were about to be cut off, these disciples naturally didn't care about anything else. They immediately shouted at Xiao Qin. However, when he heard these people's shouts, Xiao Qin stopped in his tracks. Seeing this, Yu Shujin, who was following behind Xiao Qin, knew that this was bad. However, just as he was about to console Xiao Qin, no one saw how Xiao Qin moved. Xiao Qin's figure instantly disappeared from where he was standing. Then, he immediately appeared in front of the young man who had spoken first. He grabbed the young man's neck and forcibly lifted him up. "I said that I would cut it off just like that. Just because I am the heir of the seventh realm, who dares to say no to me cutting off your cultivation resources?" His voice had already turned cold. With Xiao Qin's tight grip on his neck, the young man kept struggling. However, Xiao Qin's hand was like an iron clamp. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't escape. As soon as his voice fell, Xiao Qin looked indifferently at the young man in his hand and said coldly, "Also, you are very annoying. You make me very unhappy." After saying that, everyone heard a crisp crack. Xiao Qin had directly broken the young man's neck. Kill. Murder. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded, especially the more than 100 young geniuses who had openly rebelled against Xiao Qin. Their faces were extremely pale. Who would have thought that Xiao Qin would dare to kill someone in such a brazen manner? Some of the more timid people couldn't help but blurt out, "It's over. You're finished. He is Emo Qingshu's son. Uncle Emo won't let you off if you kill him." Emo Qingshu was an immortal venerable expert from the seventh realm. However, his cultivation base wasn't at the great perfection immortal venerable realm. He had just entered the immortal venerable realm. After hearing the young man's words, Xiao Qin said indifferently, "If he's not convinced, let him come and find me. I don't mind letting him and his son reunite." He didn't care about Emo Qingshu at all. Having said that, Xiao Chen paused for a moment, swept his gaze across the more than 100 young geniuses, and said coldly, "As for you all, you'd better not appear in front of me in the future. Otherwise, if I'm in a bad mood, I might kill you all." After saying that, Xiao Chen didn't wait for anyone to reply. He turned around and left with his men, leaving behind more than 100 young geniuses who were stunned on the spot, as well as the corpse of the young man surnamed Mo. Shocking, absolutely shocking. Xiao Chen's means today had completely broken the cognition of these young geniuses. At the same time, he had also told them a truth in the most direct way. That was, Xiao Chen didn't need them to be convinced. However, they'd better not provoke him. Otherwise, the young man surnamed Mo would become an example. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1620. Xiao Chen took his people and left the Black Palace of the Seventh Realm. As Xiao Chen left, more than half of the 100 or so geniuses fell to the ground. They were indeed intimidated by Xiao Chen's means. At the same time, what made them even more regretful was that their cultivation resources would probably be cut off by Xiao Chen from now on. There was no need to doubt Xiao Chen's words. As the heir of the Seventh Realm, Xiao Chen definitely had the power to do so. All he needed to do was say the word, and all their cultivation resources would be deducted. Many people felt a deep sense of regret in their hearts. If they had not stood out to publicly oppose Xiao Chen earlier, perhaps the outcome would have been completely different. Looking at those young geniuses who left with Xiao Chen, it was obvious that they were completely fine. Xiao Chen's dominance, Xiao Chen's indifference, and Xiao Chen's decisiveness all made the geniuses regret. At the same time, they didn't truly understand that Xiao Chen was completely different from Yu Shujin until now. When Yu Shujin was the heir of the Seventh Realm, she definitely wouldn't have done such a thing. But now that it was Xiao Chen, they finally understood what it meant to have a new ruler and a new minister. Obviously, it wouldn't work to deal with Xiao Chen the way they dealt with Yu Shujin. They thought they could make Xiao Chen give in, but who would have thought that Xiao Chen would actually solve the problem so crudely in the end? It wasn't hard to imagine that these geniuses would probably have a hard time in the Seventh Realm in the future. At least, they would definitely have no cultivation resources. At the thought of having no cultivation resources in the future, they were all like frosted eggplant. But then, one of them said fiercely, "We can't just let it go like this. Even if Xiao Chen is an heir, we can't just give up like this. I don't believe that Xiao Chen can do whatever he wants in the Seventh Realm." That Heaven Pride clearly did not intend to give up his position. Everyone's gazes turned towards him. Seeing this, that Heaven Pride gritted his teeth and spoke in a deep voice. "Let's go find our parents and ask the older generation to come forward. I don't believe that Xiao Chen will really cut off our cultivation resources." The young geniuses of the Seventh Realm were basically the sons and daughters of the older generation of experts in the Seventh Realm. They had lived in the Seventh Realm since they were young. At this time, there was only one way to fight against Xiao Chen, and that was to ask their parents to step in. When the time came, would Xiao Chen really insist on doing what he wanted to do? Can't you offend everyone? This was the only way. Hearing this, everyone was silent for a moment. Then, they nodded in agreement. They did not want to be without the support of cultivation resources in the future. Because if that was the case, these people's cultivation would probably stop here. Xiao Chen had no idea what the geniuses were thinking. He had already left the Black Palace of the Seventh Realm with his people and was flying toward Yanfeng City. Along the way, Yu Shujin followed beside Xiao Chen. There were several times when she wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, she couldn't hold it in any longer and spoke carefully. "Senior brother Xiao Chen, about today's incident." Yu Shujin felt that today's incident had blown out of proportion. Of course, she wasn't afraid. After all, this had nothing to do with her. But Yu Shujin knew very well that if Shao Chun really cut off their cultivation resources, not only them, but also their parents would definitely not agree to it. When that happened, this matter would blow up completely. Moreover, Shao Chun had also killed Mo Qingshu's son. If Mo Qingshu knew about this, he would definitely not let this matter rest. In order to persuade Shao Chun, it was better to minimize the problem. After all, everyone was from the seventh realm and there was no need to make such a big fuss. However, before Yu Shujin could finish her sentence, Shao Chun interrupted her. You don't have to worry about this. A simple sentence was enough to shut Yu Shujin up. Hearing this, Yu Shujin could only smile helplessly and didn't say anything else. But in her heart, Yu Shujin was still cursing the hundreds of geniuses. They really didn't know what was good for them. Why did they have to offend Shao Chun? Didn't they know how murderous Shao Chun was? They remained silent throughout the journey. Soon, they arrived outside Yanfeng City under Shao Chun's lead. Yanfeng City was not very big. At this time, because of the war, the city defense matrix of Yanfeng City had been activated. Senior brother Shao Chun, how do we attack Yanfeng City? Yu Shujin came to Shao Chun's side and asked. This battle was led by Shao Chun, so everyone naturally had to listen to Shao Chun's orders. Hearing this, Shao Chun looked at Yanfeng City calmly and said, just attack them directly. Without any tactics, just attack them directly. Hearing this, Yu Shujin was stunned. The hundreds of geniuses from the seventh realm were also stunned. Just attack them directly? Without any tactics? Everyone was depressed, but what Shao Chun said next made them secretly relieved. Leave Yin Yangzi and the other two to me. As for the others, I think you should have no problem with that, right? Yin Yangzi and the other two would be dealt with by Shao Chun. As for the others, the geniuses were not afraid. Hearing this, everyone was slightly relieved. After saying this, without waiting for anyone to answer, Shao Chun took the lead and flew directly to the sky above Yanfeng City. At the same time, with the appearance of Shao Chun, three figures also rose into the air from a mansion in the center of Yanfeng City. It was Yin Yangzi and the other two. Separated by the formation, Shao Chun and Yin Yangzi looked at each other from a distance. When they saw that it was Shao Chun, hatred appeared in the eyes of Yin Yangzi and the other two. The three of them guarded Yanfeng City, and had long expected that the seventh realm would definitely attack. However, they did not expect that the person who came would be Shao Chun. They had more or less contact with Yin Yangzi and the other two, but this time, they had become enemies. With a calm gaze, Shao Chun looked indifferently at the three people in the formation. At the same time, Yin Yangzi also looked at Shao Chun and shouted angrily. Thief! How dare you appear in front of us again? I will kill you today. Yin Yangzi's killing intent towards Shao Chun could be said to be extremely strong, but Shao Chun was not affected at all. Anyone who stopped him was an enemy. No matter who it was, as long as they were an enemy, they should be killed. In order to resurrect his family and take revenge, Shao Chun no longer cared about anything else. Therefore, when he heard Yin Yangzi's words, Shao Chun only replied indifferently. Activate the city protection formation and get out of Yanfeng City. I can let you go. Shao Chun's words were emotionless, as if Yin Yangzi and the other two were just three strangers. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 16:21. Yin Yangzi's scolding did not cause any ripples in Shao Chun's heart. Previously, when he faced the wine Taoist, Shao Chun's heart was completely cold. Everyone chose to believe in the will of the heavenly way and not believe in him. They all thought that he had killed his father and wife and betrayed the seventh realm. As such, Shao Chun naturally had nothing to say. They were already enemies when they met again. Since they were enemies, there was no reason for them to hold back. Therefore, when Shao Chun was faced with Yin Yangzi's scolding, his expression did not change at all. When they heard Shao Chun's words, the anger in the eyes of Yin Yangzi and the other two burned even more fiercely. The Dragon Emperor looked at Shao Chen and said in a deep voice, "Shao Chen, let me tell you, if you want to take down Yanfeng City, you have to do it over our dead bodies." The three of them were obviously going to defend Yanfeng City to the death. When he heard this, Shao Chen did not say anything and directly struck out with his palm, fiercely bombarding the great city barrier array of Yanfeng City. "Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish." After the palm landed, Shao Chen said indifferently. He did not use any martial technique. It was just an ordinary palm. However, with Shao Chen's current cultivation, even such an ordinary palm was not something that the great city barrier array of Yanfeng City, a low-grade saint level, could withstand. A saint level formation was useless against an immortal realm expert. It did not have any effect at all. The giant palm formed by spiritual energy descended from the sky. The blood-red hand was like a devil's hand that reached out from the depths of hell. It fiercely suppressed the great city barrier array of Yanfeng City. The huge blood-red palm enveloped the entire Yanfeng City. The sky seemed to be covered by this palm. At the same time, the great city barrier array of Yanfeng City only lasted for less than 3 breaths. Then, cracks appeared on it. It was not far from shattering. To the people of Yanfeng City, the scene in front of them was like the end of the world. Looking at the blood-red palm descending from the sky and the collapsing city-protecting formation, the faces of many people in Yanfeng City were filled with extreme fear. Some of them even screamed in a frenzy. "Demon, it's a demon!" Countless pairs of eyes stared at Shao Chen outside the formation. They were all familiar with Shao Chen. After all, Shao Chen had once been the first sacred son in the 7th wilderness. He was the pride and respect of all the cultivators in the 7th wilderness. But now, in the eyes of the people of Yanfeng City, Shao Chen was a devil. A devil through and through, a cruel and murderous devil. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Shao Chen. Thinking about it, it was ironic. In less than a year, Shao Chen had turned from the pride in everyone's eyes to a demon that everyone wanted to kill. A year ago, Shao Chen was the pride of the 7th wilderness. He was the idol of all the cultivators. Now, a year later, Shao Chen had become a demon that everyone feared and hated. While they were afraid of Shao Chen, they also wanted to tear Shao Chen into pieces. Facing the horrified gazes of the crowd, Shao Chen had no intention of paying attention to them. The blood-red palm continued to fall. Finally, the city-protecting formation of Yanfeng City could no longer hold on. With a muffled sound, it shattered. In one battle, the city-protecting formation of Yanfeng City had been broken. Moreover, without the obstruction of the formation, the blood-red palm continued to press down on the ground. It was hard to imagine how many people in Yanfeng City would die if this palm fell. In the face of death, many cultivators had already begun to flee. As for those without cultivation, they all looked at Yin Yangzi and the other two. If Shao Chen was a demon in their eyes, then Yin Yangzi and the other two were their hope. Their only hope of survival. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the city-protecting formation was broken. Yin Yangzi and the other two finally made their move. In the face of Shao Chen's palm, the three of them attacked at the same time. The 3 attacks bombarded the blood-red palm almost at the same time. The two sides collided head-on. With a loud bang, the aftershock spread in all directions. In an instant, Yanfeng City below was almost flattened. Countless people without cultivation were also turned into ashes in an instant. The aftershock of the battle between the immortal realm mighty figures was not an existence that could destroy the world, but it was definitely comparable to a disaster. Moreover, at such a close distance, how could the people in Yanfeng City who did not have cultivation be spared? Not to mention the commoners who had no cultivation base, even the cultivators who had cultivation bases were affected and lost their lives in the collision just now. Seeing that Yanfeng City was almost destroyed in one attack, Xing Zhantian looked at Shao Chen with a face full of killing intent and shouted, "Shao Chen, you demon! Are you finished?" You are also from the seventh wilderness. How could you do such a thing? In the eyes of Xing Zhantian and the other two, the destruction of Yanfeng City and the loss of countless lives was all Xiao Chen's responsibility. However, when he heard this, Xiao Chen's face revealed a cold and somewhat evil sneer. Me? Ha, what a joke! Didn't the three of you make a move just now? You're full of Taoism, but after being a bitch, you seem to want to set up a monument. Is this your so-called justice? The heavenly path? Indeed, Xiao Chen was not the only one who attacked just now. Yin Yangzi and the other two also made a move. It was the aftershock of the battle between the four of them that swept through Yanfeng City. Therefore, the death of many people in Yanfeng City was not only caused by Xiao Chen, but also by Yin Yangzi and the other two. It could be said that Yin Yangzi and the other two were also the culprit. Unfortunately, they were unwilling to admit it. In their eyes, they would always be the side of justice, the side that represented the will of the heavenly way, the guardian of many lives. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the killing intent in Yin Yangzi and the other two's eyes intensified. However, at the same time, seeing the tragic scene below, a complicated look flashed across their eyes. Indeed, the three of them had also made a move just now. Compared to the complicated expressions of the three, Xiao Chen seemed very indifferent. He was not the slightest bit emotional because of what had happened in front of him. After a slight pause, Xiao Chen continued. Moreover, I'm not the god they believe in. Since the will of the heavenly way can't save them, what can I do? This is your last chance. Get out of Yanfeng City. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yin Yangzi and the other two did not move at all. On the contrary, their auras soared into the sky. Seeing that the three of them were prepared to fight to the death and not retreat, Xiao Chen did not bother to say anything more. He shouted to the geniuses of the seventh realm around him in a deep voice. Take down Yanfeng City. Kill anyone who tries to stop you. He had already given Yin Yangzi and the other two a chance. However, since the three of them insisted on stopping him, Xiao Chen had no reason to hold back. As for the so-called old friendship, in Xiao Chen's eyes, it was not worth mentioning. For his family, Xiao Chen had abandoned everything. Please add it to your collection, monthly vote recommend it. Chapter 1622. With a cold heart, Xiao Chen naturally did not have the slightest bit of mercy. Looking at Yin Yangzi and the other two, who were determined to live and die with Yanfeng City, Xiao Chen did not say any more nonsense. With a thought, the dustless sword immediately appeared in his hand. With the blood-red dustless sword in his hand, a strong bloody aura suddenly spread out. At the same time, Xiao Chen did not say anything and directly slashed out with the sword. The sword tip slashed straight at Yin Yangzi and the other two. With Xiao Chen making a move, the Seventh Realm's geniuses naturally did not dare to stay idle. They all rushed towards Yanfeng City. Having seen Xiao Chen's means, no one dared to be disrespectful to Xiao Chen. Although not everyone was convinced by Xiao Chen, on the surface, these geniuses were respectful to Xiao Chen. In this way, Xiao Chen was already satisfied. There was no need for them to be convinced. The battle in Yanfeng City immediately began. In the face of Xiao Chen's attack, Yin Yangzi and the other two also immediately resisted. The three of them joined forces and unsurprisingly blocked Xiao Chen's sword. However, just as the three of them were about to block Xiao Chen's sword, Xiao Chen appeared in front of Yin Yangzi in an instant. No one could see how he moved. Facing Yin Yangzi, Xiao Chen's eyes were emotionless. At the same time, he did not hesitate to slash down with his sword. He directly displayed the 9 Serenity sword technique. Obviously, even when facing Yin Yangzi, Xiao Chen did not hold back at all. Although Xiao Chen and Yin Yangzi once had a very deep relationship, Yin Yangzi was now blocking his way. In Xiao Chen's eyes, anyone who blocked him was an enemy. There was no need to say much to an enemy. There was only one word to say, kill. Therefore, facing Yinyangzi, Xiao Chen did not hesitate at all. He directly slashed out with his sword, and the blood-red sword tip slid down. Seeing this, the Dragon Emperor and Xing Zhantian's expressions changed. They immediately rushed over to help. Yinyangzi alone could not stop Xiao Chen. The three of them knew this very well. After all, Xiao Chen had condensed the heavenly immortal mansion, while the three of them had only condensed the earth immortal mansion. As a result, there was a huge difference in their combat strength. Not to mention, Xiao Chen's cultivation had reached the initial immortal realm, while the three of them were still at the initial immortal realm. There was a difference in both combat strength and cultivation. So, Yinyangzi alone would not be able to block Xiao Chen's sword. However, even though the Dragon Emperor and Xing Zhantian had rushed over to help, it was a pity that Yinyangzi was still injured by Xiao Chen's sword in the end. A deep wound appeared on Yinyangzi's chest. It was also because of the Dragon Emperor and Xing Zhantian. Otherwise, Yinyangzi's injuries would have been more severe. The sword did not severely injure Yinyangzi. At most, it could only be considered as injuring him. However, Xiao Chen did not care too much about this. After all, the outcome was already decided. He did not take Yinyangzi and the other two seriously. With their strength, they could no longer stop Xiao Chen. Yinyangzi was injured by the sword. However, the three of them managed to block Xiao Chen's sword with their combined strength. However, the battle had only just begun. Xiao Chen did not give the three of them any time to react. After injuring Yinyangzi, he did not stop. He took a step forward and used the heavenly star step. Instantly, he shot towards the three of them. Faced with Xiao Chen's attack, Yinyangzi and the other two attacked at the same time. In an instant, the four of them were engaged in a fierce battle. However, even though the three of them had joined forces, they still could not gain any advantage over Xiao Chen. On the contrary, as time passed, the pressure on the three of them increased. In less than a quarter of an hour, Xiao Chen had gained the upper hand. He was able to suppress Yinyangzi and the other two with his own strength. This was the terror of the heavenly immortal palace. At the same level, the difference between the heavenly immortal palace and the earthly immortal palace was like heaven and earth. There was no comparison at all. The injuries on their bodies continued to worsen. On the other hand, Xiao Chen's white robes were still clean and tidy. He did not seem to have suffered any injuries. At this point in the battle, the defeat of Yinyangzi and the other two could be said to be a foregone conclusion. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. It was difficult to reverse the situation. The injuries on their bodies continued to worsen. At this moment, Xiao Chen pointed his finger once again. He used the Xianyuan finger sword. A blood-red sword flashed past and immediately, the three of them fell from the sky and heavily smashed into the ground below. Dust rose as the figures of Yinyangzi and the other two were engulfed by the dust. They stood in the air and indifferently looked at the direction where the three of them had fallen. After a long while, when the dust slowly dissipated, the figures of Yinyangzi and the other two appeared before the crowd once again. However, at this moment the three of them were already in an extremely miserable state. Their messy hair, tattered clothes, and their bodies were covered in blood. All of this showed how powerless the three of them were. Against Xiao Chen, the three of them were indeed powerless. They were simply unable to defeat him. Even if the three of them worked together, the gap between them and Xiao Chen was still difficult to make up for. This was the terror of the heavenly immortal manor. Their faces were still resolute as they looked at Xiao Chen in the sky. Even though the battle had reached such a state, the three of them still had no intention of backing down. It had to be said that the will of the heavenly way held an extremely high position in the hearts of all living beings. Just like now, because of a single command from the will of the heavenly way, Yinyangzi and the other two could fight to the death without retreating. They were even willing to give up their lives. It was obvious just how high the position of the will of the heavenly way was in their hearts. Moreover, Yangzi and the other two were not just exceptions. It could be said that all living beings in the seventh wasteland worshipped the will of the heavenly way like a god. A single command from the will of the heavenly way was enough to make all living beings give up their lives. Faced with Yangzi and the other two who still refused to back down, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "I'll say this one last time. Scram or die." This was the final warning that Xiao Chen gave to Yangzi and the other two. If it were not for their past friendship, the three of them would have already died under Xiao Chen's sword. With Xiao Chen's current personality, giving them 3 chances was already very patient. However, faced with Xiao Chen's last chance, the three of them had no intention of backing down. Yangzi endured the pain in his chest and took a step forward. He looked coldly at Xiao Chen and shouted coldly, "Thief, I've said it before. If you want Yanfeng City, you'll have to step over my dead body." As soon as he finished speaking, Yangzi paused, then shouted loudly, "As long as the will of the heavenly way exists, the noble spirit will last forever. I'm willing to use this body to guard Yanfeng City." Yangzi shouted loudly. At the same time, the Dragon Emperor and Xing Zhantian also shouted, "As long as the will of the heavenly way exists, the noble spirit will last forever. I'm willing to use this body to guard Yanfeng City." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1623. Yangzi and the other two cried out loudly. Very quickly, waves of furious cries rang out from various parts of Yanfeng City, which had already turned into ruins. The way of the heavens is indestructible, and the noble spirit is everlasting. I swear to protect Yanfeng City with this body. Following the angry shouts, the morale of the defenders of Yanfeng City instantly soared. This was the power of the will of the heavenly way. Just a single oath was enough to make these people disregard their lives. In their eyes, the so-called justice was worth it for them to give up everything. They held on to the justice in their hearts. Compared to death, the justice in their hearts and the noble spirit were obviously more important. However, Xiao Chen did not care about this at all. Justice? What was right? What was evil? Could the good and evil of the world be determined by a single person's words? Could it be that what the will of the heavenly way said was right? Then what about his family? Could it be justice that the will of the heavenly way killed them? Right and wrong, good and evil, right and wrong, who could tell? Who could sort them out? Xiao Chen no longer believed in the good and evil of the world. Xiao Chen only believed in the 3-foot-long sword in his hand. Whether it was good or evil, whether it was right or wrong, in Xiao Chen's eyes, he would cut through all the changes in the world with his sword. With the 3-foot-long sword in his hand, he swore to create a new world. Hearing the angry shouts coming from all around and the high morale of the defenders, Xiao Chen's gaze fell on Yangzi and the other two. He said indifferently, "If that's the case, then die. The way of the heavens is indestructible, and the noble spirit is everlasting." What a joke! Since it was for the justice in their hearts, then die. He had already given Yangzi and the other two 3 chances, but the 3 of them refused to retreat. Xiao Chen would fulfill their wishes. After he finished speaking, Xiao Chen slowly raised the dustless sword in his hand. At the same time, a terrifying bloody aura gathered crazily on the dustless sword. A monstrous murderous intent spread out in all directions. Xiao Chen really wanted to kill them. Since he gave Yangzi and the other two a chance and they didn't want it, he could only kill them. They couldn't block it. Before Xiao Chen's sword had even landed, Yangzi and the other two already felt an unstoppable aura. The 3 of them couldn't block this sword. It might have been possible if they were at their peak, but now Yangzi and the other two were seriously injured. They couldn't block Xiao Chen's sword at all. They were going to die. The aura of death was surging towards them. However, facing Xiao Chen's sure-kill attack, Yin Yangzi and the other two did not retreat. They only stared at Xiao Chen. It felt as if even if they were going to die, they would still look at Xiao Chen. They ignored Yin Yangzi and the other two's actions. However, just as Xiao Chen's sword was about to land, a spatial crack suddenly appeared. Then, a cold voice was heard. "Stop!" Along with the voice, a young girl in a green dress strode out of the spatial crack that suddenly appeared. Her face was cold and her eyes were filled with anger as she looked at Xiao Chen. On the other side, when Xiao Chen saw the young girl appear, he unconsciously stopped what he was doing. It wasn't because the young girl was so strong that Xiao Chen didn't dare to make a move. It was because of the young girl's identity that Xiao Chen couldn't make a move. The young girl in the green dress was none other than Xiao Chen's second sister, Long Qing. The sudden appearance of Long Qing finally caused a ripple in Xiao Chen's heart. When facing Yin Yangzi and the other two, Xiao Chen might be cold and heartless. However, when facing Long Qing, Xiao Chen couldn't do this. This was because the position of Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling in Xiao Chen's heart was far from what Yin Yangzi and the others could compare with. It was no exaggeration to say that Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing were no different from Qin Shuru and the other two's position in Xiao Chen's heart. They were the most important people in his life. When Xiao Chen faced Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling at the gate of the immortal region, his heart was already stirred. At that time, they hadn't met face to face yet. However, at this moment, Long Qing's sudden appearance finally allowed the siblings to stand face to face. Since the so-called betrayal of the seventh wilderness, Xiao Chen and Long Qing met face to face for the first time. Looking at Long Qing in front of him, Xiao Chen's heart couldn't help but ripple inch by inch. I, Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and Xiao Chen will be sworn brothers from today onwards. In the future, we will share blessings and hardships together. He couldn't help but recall Chang Jing when they first became sworn brothers. At that time, the three of them were very weak. However, with Chang Jing's support along the way, the three of them walked step by step to the central world. He thought that in this life, he wouldn't let Qingqing and himself down. Who would have thought that the three of them, who were once brothers, would now become enemies? For the first time, a complicated look flashed in his eyes. Facing Long Qing, Xiao Chen couldn't do it. He couldn't do it at all. His heart had already turned cold. However, some people were still the most important. He had already lost Qin Shuru, his 4 daughters, and his parents. Could Xiao Chen still kill his eldest brother and second sister with his own hands? Would there really be no one else in this world that he cherished? He looked at Long Qing with a complicated look. He had already raised his Wuchen sword high, but he couldn't bring it down for a long time. In the face of Xiao Chen's complicated feelings, Long Qing's face was filled with anger and killing intent from beginning to end. She didn't hesitate or struggle at all. It was also because Long Qing wasn't strong enough. Otherwise, she would have definitely killed Xiao Chen without saying a word. This was the result of the memory being tampered with. In Long Qing's eyes, Xiao Chen was an enemy of life and death. Xiao Chen could clearly feel the strong killing intent and hatred in Long Qing's eyes. At this moment, he felt as if his heart was being pierced by a needle. It was very painful. He used to think that even if the whole world didn't believe him, Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing would definitely believe him, because they were his eldest brother and second sister. However, reality slapped Xiao Chen hard in the face. Now, the whole world indeed didn't believe Xiao Chen, but Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling hated Xiao Chen to the bone. This made Xiao Chen's heart ache. The people closest to him were the people who hated him the most. How ridiculous! Xiao Chen didn't know that everyone's memories had been tampered with by the will of the heavenly way. He looked at Long Qing with a complicated look in his eyes. After a long silence, he finally opened his mouth and spoke in a hoarse voice. Do do you really think that I would kill my father and wife? In his heart, he still hoped that Long Qing would believe him. After all, Xiao Chen no longer had any relatives in this world. Only Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing were left. He hoped that Long Qing would believe him. He hoped that Long Qing would stand on his side. He didn't need Long Qing to do anything. As long as Long Qing could say that she believed in him, Xiao Chen would be satisfied. There was a hint of longing in his voice. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen's blood-red eyes stared at Long Qing. Although he was still as demonic as before, the look in his eyes had changed a lot. He was no longer as indifferent as before. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1624. His blood-red eyes looked at Long Qing with a complicated expression, and there was even a trace of nervousness. Xiao Chen was waiting for Long Qing's answer. He hoped that Long Qing would believe him. After all, Long Qing was the closest person to him. However, Xiao Chen was going to be disappointed. In the face of his question, although Long Qing's eyes flashed with confusion at first, she quickly shouted with a face full of hatred, "Humph, who else could it be if it wasn't you? You killed your father and your wife. Xiao Chen, you're worse than a beast." At first, Long Qing's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. When she faced Xiao Chen, there was a slight fluctuation in her originally tampered memory, which made Long Qing's heart throb. But soon, this confusion disappeared. Therefore, Long Qing could not believe Xiao Chen. How could the memory that was personally tampered with by the heavenly way be so easily erased? The fact that there was a slight fluctuation in the tampered memory was enough to show Xiao Chen's position in Long Qing's heart. Perhaps in the depths of her heart, the real Long Qing was struggling hard to break free from the will of the heavenly way and recover her original memory. Unfortunately, in the face of the power of the will of the heavenly way, her struggle was meaningless. This was not Long Qing's heartfelt words. The real Long Qing would definitely believe Xiao Chen without hesitation. Even if Xiao Chen really became the enemy of the whole world, Long Qing would still stand by Xiao Chen's side without hesitation. However, Xiao Chen did not know that Long Qing's memory had been tampered with. After hearing this, the last hope in Xiao Chen's heart disappeared. The complicated look in her eyes, which even contained a trace of desire and nervousness, quickly disappeared and was replaced by indifference. She was even more indifferent than before. If Xiao Chen still had a glimmer of hope in his heart before, and this glimmer of hope came from Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing. Now, with Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen's hope in his heart was completely shattered. A self-deprecating smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Yes, who in this world would believe me? The will of the heavenly way is like a god in the hearts of all living beings. If he said that he killed his father and wife, and said that he is a traitor, then everyone in the world will think that he is a traitor. The hope in her heart was mercilessly shattered. However, Long Qing said coldly, at this moment, "Master, you and your master, both of you should die." Master? Long Qing's of the heavenly way of you, Long Qing's eyes, of course, there was only indifference in his eyes. Master? What do you mean? Long Qing did not believe him, which destroyed the last bit of hope in Xiao Chen's heart. However, when he heard Long Qing mention his master, Xiao Chen's first reaction was to think of the wine Taoist. In the face of Xiao Chen's question, Long Qing sneered and then briefly explained the matter of the wine Taoist. In the end, Long Qing sneered and said, "Your master is really stubborn. He actually went against the heavenly way for you. Now, he has been locked up in the dark prison and is waiting to die." The wine Taoist was willing to go against the will of the heavenly way for him. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's cold heart suddenly warmed. Although this warmth was very faint and was not enough to warm Xiao Chen's cold heart, Xiao Chen did not know how to describe this feeling. The wine Taoist was like a beam of light that pierced through the dark clouds that shrouded Xiao Chen's heart. Although it was only a very weak beam of light, it did indeed illuminate Xiao Chen's heart. However, when he thought about how the wine Taoist's cultivation had been crippled and then locked up in the dark prison, the hatred in Xiao Chen's heart grew. Of course, this hatred came from the will of the heavenly way. The will of the heavenly way had already taken away the lives of his family. Could it be that the will of the heavenly way was going to kill his master as well? The hatred in his heart was overflowing. Xiao Chen secretly swore, "The will of the heavenly way, I will not let you take anyone away from me." Xiao Chen had already tasted the feeling of losing his family. He would not let the will of the heavenly way take anyone away from him. This was Xiao Chen's vow. Xiao Chen secretly swore in his heart. However, on the surface, Xiao Chen's expression did not change at all. After hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen looked at Long Qing indifferently. Long Qing's hatred, anger, and disbelief really hurt Xiao Chen's heart. However, Xiao Chen could not kill her. Xiao Chen could not do it. "Let's go. Let's leave Yanfeng City." In the end, he did not kill her. Xiao Chen could ignore their old friendship with Yin Yangzi and the other two. However, he could not do the same with Long Qing. The relationship between the two of them was no longer a matter of friendship. It was more like family. It was a family that was still connected even if their bones were broken. Therefore, even if Long Qing hated him, even if Long Qing did not believe him, Xiao Chen still could not do anything to her. "It doesn't matter if I'm a demon or a god. You're still my second sister." Xiao Chen finally decided to let the four of them go as he thought to himself. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing did not say anything. However, Yin Yangzi bellowed from below. "I've said it before. If you want to take down Yanfeng City, you'll have to step over my dead body." Yin Yangzi and the other two were really prepared to die. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen directly slapped them across the air. In an instant, Yin Yangzi and the others, who were already seriously injured, were sent flying by Xiao Chen's slap. They landed in the forest thousands of meters away, far away from Yanfeng City. Seeing that Xiao Chen attacked them without saying a word, Long Qing's eyes were filled with hatred. She opened her mouth and was about to shout angrily, "Xiao Chen, you scram!" However, before Long Qing could speak, Xiao Chen shouted angrily. He directly asked Long Qing to scram. To be honest, Xiao Chen was indeed very sad because of Long Qing's attitude towards him. However, Xiao Chen also knew that Long Qing was his second sister and his family. Therefore, no matter what she did, Xiao Chen would not blame her. An angry shout interrupted Long Qing's words. Seeing this, Long Qing's expression turned ice-cold. However, after a moment of silence, she still turned around and left. Looking at Long Qing's back, no one could understand the bitterness in Xiao Chen's heart. His second sister did not believe him and even hated him. How sad and ridiculous! The pain in his heart could only be borne by himself. Casting aside these thoughts, Xiao Chen looked at the people who were still fighting fiercely and said indifferently, "Leave Yanfeng City and you will be spared from death." Yin Yangzi, Long Qing, and Long Qing had retreated, but there were still many warriors in Yanfeng City who were fighting fiercely with the Seventh Realm's geniuses. Xiao Chen had no interest in these people, so he did not intend to waste time. If they left Yanfeng City, Xiao Chen would indeed be too lazy to kill them. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1625. Yin Yangzi and the other two were sent flying by Xiao Chen's slap. At this moment, they should have been taken away by Long Qing. Without Yin Yangzi and the other two Immortal Realm Masters, the other warriors of Yanfeng City were just a bunch of useless people in Xiao Chen's eyes. He did not even have the interest to kill these people. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, many of the warriors in Yanfeng City had no intention of retreating. Many people shouted in unison, "The way of the heavens is indestructible, and the noble spirit exists forever. I am willing to swear on my life to protect Yanfeng City." They were unafraid of death. Hearing the loud shouts of the crowd, before these people could finish their words, a blood-red sword light slashed down from the sky. Then, the place where more than a dozen warriors of Yanfeng City was directly hit by the sword light. These more than a dozen people were naturally killed in one strike. The sword light was naturally from Xiao Chen's hand. Since these people were not willing to run for their lives, then he would grant them their wish. Xiao Chen would not have the slightest bit of patience with them. He directly slashed out with his sword. Then, Xiao Chen did not waste any more time. He had already given them a chance. However, since these people swore to protect Yanfeng City even at the cost of their own lives, then Xiao Chen would naturally grant them their wish. He slashed out several more times in a row. The blood-red sword light landed in various parts of Yanfeng City. In an instant, many warriors of Yanfeng City, as well as many ordinary citizens, died under Xiao Chen's sword. With Xiao Chen's cultivation and combat strength, these ordinary warriors did not have any ability to fight back. Moreover, Xiao Chen did not hold back at all. With a few simple slashes, Yanfeng City was already flowing with blood. However, even so, the many warriors and citizens in Yanfeng City still did not have the slightest intention of retreating. The way of the heavens is indestructible, and the noble spirit exists forever. I am willing to swear on my life to protect Yanfeng City. The shout that sounded like an oath still echoed in the sky above Yanfeng City. However, Xiao Chen seemed to have turned a deaf ear to it. He did not care at all. Just as he was about to kill many warriors and civilians of Yanfeng City, Xiao Chen stepped into the city that had already been reduced to ruins. This time, the mission was to destroy Yanfeng City and bring the cultivation resources of Yanfeng City back to the seventh realm. Now that the destruction of Yanfeng City was inevitable, Xiao Chen naturally went to the city to find a place to store the cultivation resources. His figure landed on the streets of Yanfeng City. At this moment, the entire streets were in ruins. Corpses could be seen everywhere. Just as Xiao Chen landed, Hong Xiu also rushed to Xiao Chen's side. Previously, when Xiao Chen was fighting with Yin Yangzi and the other two, with Hong Xiu's cultivation, she naturally could not help much. Therefore, Hong Xiu did not follow by Xiao Chen's side to avoid being a burden to Xiao Chen. At this moment, Xiao Chen had already defeated Yin Yangzi and the other two. Naturally, Hong Xiu immediately came to Xiao Chen's side. Looking at Xiao Chen, she asked with a worried expression, "Xiao Chen, are you all right?" After all, he had just fought with Yin Yangzi and the other two Immortal Realm Masters. Hong Xiu was also worried about whether Xiao Chen had any injuries or something like that. In the face of Hong Xiu's concern, Xiao Chen shook his head slightly, indicating that he was not injured. Then, he walked towards Yanfeng City. Seeing this, Hong Xiu also hurriedly followed. Along the way, Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu passed by many areas where the two sides were still fighting. However, from the beginning to the end, Xiao Chen did not take the initiative to attack. After all, the surviving warriors of Yanfeng City were no longer a threat to the geniuses of the seventh realm. There was no need for Xiao Chen to take action at all. However, if he encountered someone who did not open their eyes and took the initiative to provoke Xiao Chen naturally would not show mercy. As they passed by another place where the two sides were fighting, two warriors of Yanfeng City saw Xiao Chen walking slowly towards them. They immediately turned their spears and directly attacked Xiao Chen. Both of them were only at the Saint Realm initial mastery. In Xiao Chen's eyes, this level of cultivation was simply not worth mentioning. Xiao Chen did not even look at them as he walked forward. Just as the two of them were less than 10 meters away from Xiao Chen, their bodies were suddenly torn apart by a blood-red sword light. Without even moving a finger, Xiao Chen killed the two of them. After killing the two of them, Xiao Chen continued to walk towards the center of Yanfeng City. However, at this moment, an old man with no cultivation and a 7- or 8-year-old child blocked Xiao Chen's path. Both of them were ordinary people with no cultivation. Looking at Xiao Chen, the old man shouted angrily, "Devil, you are a devil. You deserve to die. You will definitely go to hell." Blocking Xiao Chen's path, the old man cursed angrily. The child beside him also glared fiercely at Xiao Chen. Faced with the two people's curses, Hong Xiu was naturally angry. However, Xiao Chen did not care. He directly bypassed the two of them and prepared to leave. Xiao Chen was completely uninterested in ordinary people without any cultivation. Moreover, if they thought that he was a devil, then so be it. Anyway, for Xiao Chen, it did not matter what the world thought of him. Originally, he did not want to attack the two of them, nor did he have any intention to make a fuss about it. However, who would have thought that when Xiao Chen took the initiative to bypass the two of them, the old man still did not give up. He even raised the crutch in his hand and hit Xiao Chen fiercely. Faced with the old man's actions, Xiao Chen would have been fine even if he did not move and let the old man hit him for a year. However, Xiao Chen was obviously not that kind of person. Blood-red sword aura revolved around him. Then, the old man and the child were immediately torn apart by the blood-red sword aura. Watching Xiao Chen mercilessly killing the two of them, Hong Xiu was stunned. She was indeed angry, but she really could not bear to kill the grandfather and grandson who had no cultivation. However, Xiao Chen did not hesitate at all. "Xiao Chen, you killed them." Hong Xiu looked at Xiao Chen and said with some dissatisfaction, sympathizing with the grandfather and grandson. However, Xiao Chen only looked indifferently at the bloodstains on the ground and said indifferently, "You say that I am a devil, but you have no fear in your heart. Do you really think that I am the same as the will of the heavenly way in your hearts, who is full of Taoism and who bemoans the state of the universe and the fate of mankind? Devils do not discriminate between the old and the young when they kill." Xiao Chen glanced at Hong Xiu indifferently. Due to the Longqing incident, Xiao Chen was in a bad mood. At this moment, Hong Xiu was questioning Xiao Chen with some dissatisfaction, so Xiao Chen naturally replied in a bad mood. "If you think it's cruel, you don't have to follow me." After saying that, Xiao Chen turned around and left without any intention of stopping. Hong Xiu was a little angry when she heard this, but when she saw Xiao Chen walking further and further away, she finally stomped her foot and hurriedly chased after him. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1626. Xiao Chen did not have the slightest intention of showing mercy to the fairer sex. Previously, he had killed the pair of grandfather and grandson because they had a death wish. Even though the pair of grandfather and grandson did not have any cultivation and looked very pitiful, there was always something hateful about a pitiful person. Just as Xiao Chen had said, they kept saying that Xiao Chen was a demon, but they did not have the slightest bit of fear or reverence in their hearts. The old man even took the initiative to attack Xiao Chen. If all demons were so easily bullied, then there was probably no one in this world who would be afraid of demons. Taking advantage of their seniority, they always thought that others would not be calculative with them. This was probably the mentality of the pair of grandfather and grandson. At first, when they saw that Xiao Chen did not care about them and did not even bother to pay attention to them, the pair of grandfather and grandson became a lot bolder. They always thought that people like Xiao Chen would not kill them. After all, they were an old man and a child. That was why the old man dared to take the initiative to attack Xiao Chen. However, who knew that Xiao Chen would not let them go and directly kill them without any hesitation. Since they kept saying that they were demons, then they should have a heart of reverence for demons. Why would demons care about whether you were old or young when they killed people? She hurriedly caught up with Xiao Chen. Regarding Hongxiu's actions, Xiao Chen did not care. He continued to walk by himself and did not say anything. Following behind Xiao Chen, Hongxiu pouted and muttered with an aggrieved expression, "Humph, narrow-minded. Didn't I just say one wrong thing? Is there a need to ignore me?" Hongxiu was depressed in her heart, but Xiao Chen did not care at all and ignored her. They walked all the way to the mansion in the center of Yanfeng City. At this time, the mansion had already become a pile of ruins. However, among the ruins, Xiao Chen quickly found the entrance to a secret room. He directly walked in. Sure enough, this was the place where all kinds of cultivation resources and treasures were stored. As for the cultivation resources and treasures collected by Yanfeng City, Xiao Chen was not interested in any of them. After all, Yanfeng City was just a small city. Obviously, there would not be anything too valuable in it. Xiao Chen was too lazy to count them one by one. With a wave of his hand, he directly put everything in the secret room into his storage ring. Hongxiu was still sulking at the side. She was even more disdainful of the treasures in front of her. After all, as the little princess of the 8th realm, she had seen all kinds of treasures since she was young. In her eyes, the items from a small city were trash that couldn't even enter her eyes. The two of them didn't care about these treasures, but Luo Li's order was to bring back all the cultivation resources in Yanfeng City, so they had no choice but to do as he said. After quickly putting away these things, Xiao Chen and Hongxiu left the secret room. At the same time, just as the two of them walked out of the secret room, many geniuses from the 7th realm gathered in front of Xiao Chen one after another. After a round of fighting, almost all the warriors in Yanfeng City were killed. Except for some who escaped, there were no warriors left in Yanfeng City at this time. The rest were ordinary people with no cultivation. As for those ordinary people, Xiao Chen was not interested in them. Looking at the hundreds of geniuses in front of him, Xiao Chen gently waved his hand. Half of the treasures collected in the secret room were directly placed in front of everyone by Xiao Chen. Divide it. Xiao Chen and Hongxiu were not interested in these things, but for many geniuses present, they were still useful. For example, those elixirs and natural treasures used for cultivation. Although they were not the best things, it was better than nothing. Who would complain about having too many cultivation resources? They did not expect Xiao Chen to be so generous. Immediately, everyone present was overjoyed. However, only Yu Shujin came to Xiao Chen hesitantly and said carefully, "Senior Xiao Chen, this is against the rules." Luo Li's order was to bring back the cultivation resources of Yanfeng City, but Xiao Chen actually divided them directly here. This was indeed against the rules. After all, in the 7th realm, any reward must go through the proper channels. Directly giving out rewards like this somewhat violated the rules of the 7th realm. She was worried that she would be held accountable, but after hearing Yu Shujin's words, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "It's fine. If there's a problem, look for me. It has nothing to do with you. Just divide it." He did not care about the rules at all. Besides, Xiao Chen was also clear that Luo Li would not care about such treasures. Therefore, it was fine to divide them. Moreover, as the heir of the 7th realm, Xiao Chen still had this bit of authority. This was the first time everyone followed Xiao Chen into a battle. Xiao Chen was very satisfied with their performance. At least in the process of this battle, no one disobeyed him. In this case, Xiao Chen naturally had to be more generous. As soon as Xiao Chen finished speaking, everyone quickly divided up the various cultivation resources in front of them. In this regard, Yu Shujin could only smile bitterly in her heart. She thought that Xiao Chen was really a person who did not have any taboos. However, after this battle, the Sky Pride's impression of Xiao Chen had changed. Looking at the expression in their eyes, there was not much hostility towards Xiao Chen. Although they were not completely convinced, it could be considered as a preliminary recognition of Xiao Chen's identity as the heir of the seventh realm. He was completely uninterested in the psychological changes of these people. In any case, Xiao Chen did not care how these people viewed him. It did not matter if they hated him or were hostile towards him. After dividing up the cultivation resources, everyone was full. Then, Xiao Chen ordered them to return to the Seventh Realm's Black Palace. Now that Yanfeng City had been destroyed and all the cultivation resources had been plundered by Xiao Chen, there was no need for them to stay here. The group directly returned to the Seventh Realm's Black Palace. However, while Xiao Chen was leading them back, in the main hall of the Seventh Realm's Black Palace, several immortal venerables were surrounding an immortal emperor and talking at the same time. After listening carefully, it turned out that these people were here to complain, and the one they were complaining about was Xiao Chen. One of the middle-aged men was the most agitated. He looked at the immortal emperor in front of him and said angrily, "Elder Li Qiu, you have to seek justice for my son. My son was killed by Xiao Chen just because he said something. What a scandal! Xiao Chen is simply too presumptuous. He must be severely punished this time," the middle-aged man said with righteous indignation. He was naturally the father of the young man surnamed Mo Qinshu. However, as soon as Mo Qinshu returned to the Seventh Realm, he heard the news that his son was killed by Xiao Chen. He was so angry that he vomited blood and fainted. As soon as he woke up, he went to the higher-ups of the Seventh Realm and wanted to sue Xiao Chen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1627. Mo Qingshu's face was filled with grief and indignation, but it was understandable. After all, Xiao Chen had killed his only son. As his father, it would be strange if he wasn't angry. If it weren't for the fact that Xiao Chen was the heir of the Seventh Realm, Mo Qinshu wouldn't have come to complain at all. Instead, he would have gone straight to Xiao Chen and killed him to avenge his son. However, Mo Qinshu still had some sense. Otherwise, if he really went to seek revenge on Xiao Chen, it would be hard to say who would be the one to kill who in the end. As soon as Mo Qingshu's voice faded, the other immortal venerables at the side also chimed in. "That's right, Elder Li Qiu. We can't let Xiao Chen be so presumptuous. He actually said that he would cut off my son's cultivation resources. Isn't this equivalent to crippling my son?" These immortal venerables who had come with Mo Qinshu were the fathers of the geniuses who had openly opposed Xiao Chen. Facing their anger, Li Qiu's heart was filled with bitterness. In the Seventh Realm, Li Qiu's status was very high because of his powerful strength. He had reached the limit of the Great Perfection Immortal Emperor Realm and was only one step away from the Immortal Emperor Realm. Therefore, Li Qiu was one of the few elders with real power in the Seventh Realm. During this period of time, Luoli didn't seem to be in the Seventh Realm. No one knew where he had gone. Therefore, Li Qiu was in charge of the Black Palace in the Seventh Realm. Today, Mo Qinshu and the others came aggressively to ask Li Qiu to severely punish Xiao Chen. Li Qiu smiled helplessly as he looked at the furious Mo Qinshu and the other celestial venerables who were also furious. "Everyone, it's not that I don't want to punish Xiao Chen, but you all know Xiao Chen's identity. In the entire Seventh Realm, only the Realm Lord can punish the heir of the Seventh Realm. Don't you all know this? Xiao Chen was the heir of the Seventh Realm. His status wasn't lower than Li Qiu's. Although Li Qiu was an immortal emperor and one of the few elders with real power in the Seventh Realm, he indeed wasn't qualified to punish Xiao Chen. At least, he had to report it to Luoli and obtain Luoli's consent before he could punish Xiao Chen. Of course, there were some reasons that Li Qiu didn't mention, otherwise, Mo Qinshu and the others would have vomited blood. In fact, Li Qiu didn't want to get involved in the things that Mo Qinshu and the others were talking about because these were the matters of the younger generation. According to the rules of the Seventh Realm, the heirs of Kunlun Field were the leaders of the young geniuses of the Seventh Realm. Therefore, it was Xiao Chen's right to cut off the cultivation resources of those geniuses. There was nothing wrong with that. As for killing Mo Qingshu's son, it was indeed a bit too much, but it was not a serious mistake. So, how do you think Xiao Chen should be punished? Xiao Chen had just gone a little overboard, but it wasn't a big mistake. Most importantly, Li Qiu knew Xiao Chen's character. He didn't want to provoke this little lunatic. Therefore, he really didn't want to be involved in this matter. The meaning of his words was very clear. If you want to punish Xiao Chen, go directly to the Realm Lord. It's useless to look for me. However, Mo Qinshu, who was already extremely furious, clearly didn't understand what Li Qiu was implying. Hearing those words, Mo Qinshu coldly shouted with a face full of anger. Elder Li Qiu, do you mean we should just let this matter go? Do we have to wait for the Realm Lord to come back? Mo Qinshu was bent on avenging his son, so he could be said to be a little aggressive when facing Li Qiu. Facing Mo Qinshu's attitude, Li Qiu was slightly angry in her heart. What? Do you think there's a problem with what I said? Xiao Chen is an heir of the Kunlun realm. This old man has no right to punish him. I can only wait for the Realm Lord to come back. Mo Qinshu, do you not understand my words? His voice was obviously filled with anger. Sensing Li Qiu's anger, the anger in Mo Qinshu's heart was instantly extinguished. Previously, as Mo Qinshu was in a hurry to avenge his son, he didn't care about his attitude at all. But now, with Li Qiu's anger, Mo Qinshu came to his senses. Li Qiu was a great perfection, immortal emperor. He, Mo Qinshu, didn't have the ability to challenge Li Qiu. Not only Mo Qinshu, but the other immortal venerables also had a slight change in expression and immediately shut their mouth. Seeing that everyone had become obedient in an instant, Li Qiu's expression eased slightly. Then, he said indifferently, I will inform the Realm Lord about Xiao Chen's matter. When the time comes, the Realm Lord will decide how to punish him. All of you just need to go back and do the same. Also, now is the time when the war has broken out. As the people of the Seventh Realm, I think you shouldn't put your thoughts on these things. Instead, you should think about how to deal with the experts of the two desolates. The most important thing is to deal with them, Li Qiu said indifferently. Mo Qinshu and the others immediately nodded. Then, under Li Qiu's signal, Mo Qinshu and the others retreated from the hall respectfully. Looking at the backs of Mo Qinshu and the others, Li Qiu revealed a helpless smile and said, These guys. Of all the people they could provoke, they just had to provoke that little lunatic. Sai, as one of the higher-ups of the Seventh Realm, Li Qiu knew how important Xiao Chen was to the Seventh Realm. Therefore, he didn't think that Luo Li would punish Xiao Chen. Unfortunately, Mo Qinshu and the others didn't know this and insisted on pestering Xiao Chen. After ordering Mo Qinshu and the others to leave, Li Qiu's figure also disappeared from the hall. On the other side, Mo Qinshu and the others who had just walked out of the hall coincidentally bumped into Xiao Chen and the others who had just returned from Yanfeng City. Looking at Xiao Chen and the others who had just appeared in the main square, Mo Qinshu's eyes immediately revealed a trace of raging fury and violent killing intent. His eyes locked onto Xiao Chen. Mo Qinshu, who was still standing outside the hall, immediately shouted angrily, Xiao Chen, return my son's life to me. As his voice fell, Mo Qinshu took a step forward. His figure immediately appeared in front of Xiao Chen and blocked Xiao Chen's path. His only son had been killed. Now that he had met his mortal enemy, it was only natural that he would be enraged. He glared at Xiao Chen furiously. Yu Shujin whispered into Xiao Chen's ear as she faced Mo Qinshu. Senior Xiao Chen, He is the father of the young man surnamed Mo Qingshu. After knowing Mo Qingshu's identity, Xiao Chen also felt Mo Qingshu's anger and killing intent. However, at this moment, his expression didn't change at all. He still spoke indifferently. Your son sought his own death. You can't blame others. After killing the young, the old came. Xiao Chen had seen this kind of situation many times. However, he wasn't afraid of Mo Qingshu at all. Otherwise, Xiao Chen wouldn't have killed the young man surnamed Mo without hesitation. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1628. Facing the enraged Mo Qingshu, Xiao Chen's attitude remained indifferent. He didn't fear Mo Qingshu even though Mo Qingshu was an immortal venerable expert. Mo Qingshu was just a beginner immortal venerable expert. His cultivation base was nothing in Xiao Chen's eyes. Facing Xiao Chen's indifference and hearing Xiao Chen's words, the anger in Mo Qingshu's eyes burned even brighter. Originally, Mo Qingshu was already extremely angry when Xiao Chen killed his only son in public. Now, Xiao Chen actually said that his son's death was in vain and that no one was to blame. This made Mo Qingshu even angrier. Mo Qingshu glared at Xiao Chen furiously. His fists were clenched tightly, and the murderous intent in his heart had almost reached the point where it was difficult to control. However, even though Mo Qingshu's killing intent had reached its peak, Xiao Chen was still indifferent. Seeing that Mo Qingshu didn't reply, Xiao Chen said coldly, "Get out of my way." Xiao Chen said coldly. He was too lazy to talk nonsense with Mo Qingshu. In Xiao Chen's opinion, the young man with the surname Mo was killed. As for Mo Qingshu, if he wanted to avenge his son, he could just come at him. He directly asked Mo Qingshu to get out of the way. Hearing these words, Mo Qingshu was on the verge of exploding. Not only did the young man kill his son, his attitude was still so tyrannical. It was imaginable how furious Mo Qingshu was. He couldn't help but want to attack. Seeing that Mo Qingshu still stood in front of him without any intention to get out of the way, Xiao Chen's eyes also flashed with coldness. Feeling the coldness gradually rising from Xiao Chen's body, Yu Shujin's heart sank. She immediately stood in front of the two and looked at Mo Qingshu. "Uncle Mo, this matter can't be blamed entirely on senior brother Xiao Chen. Why don't we do this? When Lord returns, he will definitely give Uncle Mo an explanation." Yu Shujin tried to persuade Mo Qingshu to leave first. Of course, it wasn't because she was worried about Xiao Chen, but because she was worried about Mo Qingshu. He already knew what kind of person Xiao Chen was. Mo Qingshu had provoked Xiao Chen time and time again, so Xiao Chen was probably a little angry. However, Xiao Chen was a person who did not know how to restrain himself at all. If anyone made him unhappy, then Xiao Chen would definitely kill them directly. Therefore, Yu Shujin had no doubt that if Mo Qingshu still wanted to stop them, Xiao Chen would definitely draw his sword and kill him in the next second. Others might not dare to attack Mo Qingshu, but Xiao Chen had no doubt about it at all. Yu Shujin even believed that if Xiao Chen had the ability to kill Mo Qingshu, then Xiao Chen would not hesitate to send the father and son to meet each other. Yu Shujin was afraid that Xiao Chen would attack Mo Qingshu. If the matter was blown out of proportion, then it would be difficult to deal with it. However, Mo Qingshu thought that Yu Shujin was worried that he would hurt Xiao Chen, so she was speaking up for Xiao Chen. Mo Qingshu was furious, so he didn't give Yu Shujin any face and shouted coldly, "Shujin, this has nothing to do with you. Don't interfere." Yu Shujin's father was also a great perfection immortal emperor in the seventh world. His status was similar to Li Qiu's, so Mo Qingshu couldn't disrespect Yu Shujin too much. However, Mo Qingshu was obviously wrong. The reason why Yu Shujin stood out wasn't because she was worried about Xiao Chen, but because she was worried about Mo Qingshu. As soon as Mo Qingshu's voice faded, Yu Shujin immediately felt an extreme chill spreading rapidly from behind her. Yu Shujin didn't need to guess to know the source of the chill. A trace of bitterness flashed in her eyes as she cursed inwardly. Mo Qingshu was really courting death. But until now, Yu Shujin still wanted to say something, but at this moment, a blood-red sword light flashed across the left side of Yu Shujin's face and shot towards Mo Qingshu. It was obvious that Xiao Chun had run out of patience. Mo Qingshu was also stunned by the sudden blood-red sword aura. His instinctive reaction made him instinctively block the attack. Xiao Chun successfully blocked the blood-red sword aura, but this was just the beginning. Blood qi burst from Xiao Chun's body as soon as the attack landed. A pair of indifferent eyes looked at Mo Qingshu. Xiao Chun said coldly, "Since you want to see your son so much, I'll send you down there and let you two reunite." Having said that, Xiao Chun took a step forward and executed the Heavenly Star Step. He bypassed Yu Shujin and appeared in front of Mo Qingshu in the blink of an eye. Without any nonsense, he slashed out with his sword. Moreover, Xiao Chun had already executed the 9 nether sword art. Obviously, he wanted to kill Mo Qingshu directly. A second-grade immortal skill. Mo Qingshu didn't expect Xiao Chun to use a second-grade immortal skill. He thought Xiao Chun was just bluffing. After all, this was the main square of the 7th World's Black Palace. Would Xiao Chun dare to fight here? He didn't think that Xiao Chun could do anything to him. However, Mo Qingshu changed his mind in just a breath's time. This was because he felt killing intent from Xiao Chun's sword. It was an extremely strong killing intent. In other words, Xiao Chun wasn't bluffing at all. He really wanted to kill Mo Qingshu. Xiao Chun was shocked, but he did not want to give Mo Qingshu any time to react. He had already tolerated Mo Qingshu for a while, but the old man refused to listen to his advice. If that was the case, Xiao Chun decided to just kill him. Otherwise, he might cause more trouble in the future. Xiao Chun's idea was very simple. If there was trouble, he would kill him. Naturally, there wouldn't be any trouble after he killed him. He directly attacked with his full strength. Many people didn't expect such a result. Only Yu Shujin expected this. A blood-red sword light flashed. The 9 nether sword art was a second-grade immortal skill. Its power couldn't be weak. Although Mo Qingshu was shocked by Xiao Chun's sword, he had no choice but to block it. He stretched out his palm, and the vigorous spiritual energy in his body gushed out. Very soon, it condensed into a spiritual energy shield in front of him. Then, the 9 nether sword art fiercely collided with the spiritual energy shield. Immediately, a terrifying shockwave erupted. The surrounding supreme talents retreated immediately. In a head-on collision, Mo Qingshu successfully blocked Xiao Chun's sword with his immortal venerable cultivation base. Of course, it wasn't easy for Mo Qingshu to block Xiao Chun's sword. Xiao Chun's strength was beyond Mo Qingshu's expectation, or it could be said that Mo Qingshu had underestimated the power of the heavenly immortal manner. However, Mo Qingshu didn't care about these problems anymore. He looked at Xiao Chun and shouted coldly, "Xiao Chun, how dare you fight in the main square? Do you still have any respect for the rules of the 7th realm? Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 1629. In the Black Palace of the 7th World, there was a micro-world that was specially used for martial arts competitions. According to the rules of the 7th World, they could only fight in that micro-world. After all, there were a lot of experts in the 7th World. Not to mention immortal venerables and immortal emperors. Even the aftershock of a battle between immortal emperors was enough to cause serious damage to the Black Palace. Just like now, when Xiao Chun and Mo Qingshu collided, the ground where they were standing had already cracked inch by inch. This was because the grade of the Black Palace wasn't low. Otherwise, the entire Black Palace would have been destroyed. Emo Qingshu was furious and shocked at the same time. The other immortal venerables who were with Emo Qingshu were standing outside the main hall with an ugly expression. They didn't expect Shao Chun to be so domineering. He didn't care where he was or what the consequences would be. Shao Chen's domineering attitude was out of their expectation. However, in the face of Emo Qingshu's rebuke, Shao Chen replied coldly, "Rules? I'm afraid you can't represent the rules of the seventh world. Moreover, in my place, my rules are the rules. In my place, my rules are the rules." Emo Qingshu's eyes burned with anger after hearing this. However, what made him even more depressed was that Shao Chen had attacked again. Previously, he thought that Shao Chen wouldn't dare to attack again. After all, this was the main square. Only those who had eaten the guts of a leopard would dare to attack in the main square. It was precisely because he thought that Shao Chen wouldn't dare to attack again that Emo Qingshu reprimanded him. However, it was clear that he was thinking too much. For Shao Chen, there was nothing that he wouldn't dare to do. He slashed out his sword again. It was the 9-nether sword art. Seeing Shao Chen attacking again, Emo Qingshu felt like he had been screwed. He shouted coldly while attacking, "Shao Chen, are you crazy? This is the main square. How dare you attack here?" Emo Qingshu didn't expect that Shao Chen would be so bold. However, Shao Chen didn't respond to Emo Qingshu's rebuke. He didn't stop at all as he dashed towards Emo Qingshu. He looked like he would not stop until he was dead. Seeing Shao Chen rushing towards him, Emo Qingshu was so angry that his eyes were twitching. He was the one who came to denounce Shao Chen, but now, he was being chased by Shao Chen. What was worse, Shao Chen's strength wasn't weak. He possessed the heavenly immortal palace and his cultivation base had broken through the initial immortal realm. Shao Chen's strength immortal venerable realm. Therefore, the pressure on Emo Qingshu increased as he fought with Shao Chen. Shao Chen obviously didn't have the slightest estimation, and Emo Qingshu naturally didn't dare to be like Shao Chen. Therefore, he had to consider a lot of things before attacking. He was afraid that he would destroy the Black Palace. One had no scruples, while the other had his hands and feet tied. As a result, Shao Chen quickly suppressed Emo Qingshu. Being suppressed by Shao Chen, Emo Qingshu could imagine the grievance in his heart. Seeing Shao Chen chasing after Emo Qingshu without holding back, Yu Shujin, who was watching from afar, was already depressed. She couldn't help but curse inwardly. This Emo Qingshu is a fool. Of all the people he could provoke, he just had to provoke Shao Chen. Now, let's see how he's going to get out of this situation. Shao Chen didn't hold back at all. The terrifying shockwaves from their battle quickly attracted the attention of many experts who were still in the Black Palace. Many voices rose into the air. Many people spoke with doubtful faces as they watched the two figures fighting intensely on the main square from afar. Who is it? Who dares to fight in the main square? That, the one who ran away seems to be Emo Qingshu. Emo Qingshu? It's really him. Where's the other one? Shao Chen, Shao Chen soon, the crowd recognized the two figures. But what made them even more puzzled was why the two of them were fighting. Moreover, it seemed like Emo Qingshu was being suppressed. Shao Chen was just a young man with a cultivation base of the immortal realm, while Emo Qingshu was an expert of the older generation with a cultivation base of the immortal venerable realm. How could he be suppressed by Shao Chen? It was somewhat baffling. But just as the crowd was puzzled, a terrifying pressure soared into the sky and forcibly separated Shao Chen and Emo Qingshu. Then, a voice slowly echoed in the main square. The person who suddenly appeared was none other than Elder Li Qiu. He forcefully stopped Shao Chen and Emo Qingshu from fighting fiercely. Li Qiu glanced around at the destroyed buildings and the cracked ground. The corner of his eyes twitched and his face turned somewhat gloomy. The two of them were simply too outrageous. Fortunately, he had arrived in time. Otherwise, the main square and even the main hall would have been destroyed by the two of them. Li Qiu returned to his cave residence alone after forcing Mo Qingshu and the others to leave. But who would have thought that Mo Qingshu and Xiao Qin would meet each other in the main square? Moreover, Mo Qingshu was an idiot. He didn't understand Xiao Qin's character at all and actually wanted to provoke Xiao Qin. Now, things had turned out like this. His face was extremely ugly. Facing Li Qiu, Mo Qingshu, this idiot, actually dared to complain about Xiao Qin. Elder Li Qiu, this man is simply too arrogant. He doesn't put the rules of the seventh realm in his eyes at all. He directly started a fight in the main square. Elder Li Qiu, this man must be severely punished. Mo Qingshu wanted to complain and ask Li Qiu to punish Xiao Qin severely. Hearing Mo Qingshu's words, Li Qiu almost couldn't help but curse. It's all your fault for provoking Xiao Qin. Didn't I say that everything will wait until the Realm Lord returns? However, just as Li Qiu suppressed the anger in his heart and didn't reprimand Mo Qingshu in public, a blood-red sword light flashed without warning. Mo Qingshu didn't have the slightest bit of vigilance. Or rather, Mo Qingshu didn't expect that Xiao Qin would dare to attack in front of Li Qiu. Therefore, before Mo Qingshu could react, the blood-red sword had already appeared in front of Mo Qingshu. By the time Mo Qingshu reacted, it was already impossible for him to dodge. Helpless, Mo Qingshu could only forcefully avoid his vitals. However, in the end, his left shoulder was still struck by the blood-red sword. Immediately, a deep wound appeared on Mo Qingshu's left shoulder, revealing his bone. Being injured in an instant, Mo Qingshu was shocked and looked at Xiao Qin angrily. Needless to say, this sword light was once again the work of Xiao Qin. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.